Grab a seat. AI Plus San Francisco is about to begin. Please take your seats. The show is about to begin.
Welcome aboard.
To kick things off, please welcome our AI Plus newsletter author and Axios Chief Technology Correspondent, Ina Fried.
Hi, everyone, and welcome. I'm so excited for Axios AI Summit San Francisco, our last Axios event of the year. I'm Ina Fried, Chief Technology Correspondent at Axios. I'm also the author of our AI Plus newsletter, which hopefully most of you get in your inbox each morning. If not, you can rectify that. Just go to axios.com/newsletters, sign up for my newsletter, sign up for Mike Allen's, sign up for Axios Local in your city. I'd like to thank everyone here in the room and those of you streaming online. Hey, welcome. Don't forget to use the hashtag Axios AI Summit with your social posts on your social network of choice. A few housekeeping things. The QR code on the back of your badge should be your trusted guide if you need anything. Has information about Wi-Fi, the run of the show, there's a map. And if you do need to take a quick call or something downstairs, we have refreshments. You can take a call. Intuit has a cool small business activation. There have been a few shifts in the program, but nothing that you need to worry about. We'll guide you all through it. Our summit was born out of the idea a few years ago that AI really is changing everything, and we wanted a venue where we could really get into the details. And we're all into smart brevity. Smart brevity is part of our events, but these are really consequential decisions that we're making. And the idea of this event is to bring those conversations to life. One other thing that makes today unique is it's not just AI Plus Summit. Some of you know I'm having a birthday. We'll have some stuff around that. You can meet up afterwards, thank you. I can tell you what it's like to be in your 50s. Let me say, that's the first time I've said that out loud, and it sounds really weird. Anyway, we have a great lineup with some of the best and brightest minds in AI. We have some really cool activations, some great demos. We also have a fun giveaway from one of our sponsors, Meta. They're going to be giving away 2 pairs of their Meta Ray-Ban smart glasses, which, if you remember, those are the ones I used to live stream my interview with Sam Altman from Davos. I use them to take pictures of my kiddo shooting hoops, playing sports. It's really fun. So stick around. We'll give you the details on that. And really to set the stage for our first conversation, but really throughout the day, there's a few big questions that I want to dig into. One is, where are we at in terms of this AI moment? It's been 2 years since ChatGPT, and some days I wake up and I'm just so excited about all the different things the technology can do. And then other days I wake up and I look at the limitations and I think, is this ever going to be good enough to trust to do things? Or are we always going to be having to supervise it, check it for mistakes? Because that would pose real limits. Another is, what is it good for and not? What are the right uses of AI? There's all this talk that it should, free us up from the drudgery and allow us to be creative. That is a future, but it's not the only one that I can envision. And I think if we don't carefully build, we won't get that future. And I'm also interested to dig into the companies that have been building it and using it to say, what's working? What's hard? Where are they finding things just work? Where are they needing a little help? But that's enough of me just talking. Without further ado, our first guests are 2 of the first people I thought of when we were doing this summit. I've known them both for a long time. They've both been in the tech industry for a long time. This is not their first hype cycle. And they're building something really interesting at Sierra, building AI agents, which is a lot of the talk of the town. They were doing it before it was the hottest buzzword. So please help me welcome Sierra's Brett Taylor and Clay Bavor. Brett and Clay. So yeah, lots to talk about. I'm really, again, excited to have the 2 of you because I think it really is necessary to understand technology, understand the pace of things, to be able to see what's coming, know what problems are going to solve themselves just by the nature of technology, and which are the ones that actually need solving. Both of you have a pretty good track record of being on the right side of that. How do you think about where we are at this moment?
I think this is one of the most exciting moments as someone who's been developing software, as you said, for quite a while now, for 20 plus years. I've been around a lot of different hype cycles, and for me, I think, like the advent of the internet, I do think there is a lot of hype right now, and it doesn't mean every individual project or individual company will be successful. But I think like the internet, when you fast forward 20 years and look back, I think the magnitude of the hype will be warranted. I think it will have the kind of impact on our personal and professional lives that it even exceeds some of the estimates right now, and it's why both of us left our jobs to work in this space. I do it for free just because I think the technology is so exciting.
You can cut his paycheck. So for those of you who don't know, Brett did this little word processor thing that got bought by Salesforce. You were co-CEO, I believe, when you left, of Salesforce. Clay, you were at Google for a long time. You were always showing me these cool augmented reality things from cardboard on forward.
Yeah, that's a deep cut.
They're finally bringing that stuff to market. Why leave AR, VR to do AI stuff?
Well, Brett and I got together almost 2 years ago to the day. We've been friends for almost 20 years. Some, sooner as opposed to later, it will be actually 20 years. And we compared notes and just could not stop thinking about the unbelievable things we were reading in research papers that were being released seemingly by the month and now the week. I was privileged at Google to have a front row seat on a lot of the early developments in and around large language models. And I remember one of the head exploding moments that I shared with Brett early on was we asked one of the early large language models, can you explain the 2008 financial crisis using a movie reference? And without skipping a beat, so the 2008 financial crisis was a lot like the movie Inception, except instead of dreams within dreams, it was debt within debt. It was like, what? And then DALL-E came out a few months later, right? And you had it making avocado chairs seemingly out of thin air. And so just as someone who's been obsessed with computers since I was a kid, the pace of change and the ingredients to cook with, if you will, that have all of a sudden become available are just breathtaking. And I think when there's such a technology sea change like that, the proverbial deck of cards is shuffled, and it's a great time to explore the new and set out and build something from scratch, which is what we did 2 years ago.
Well, let's dive into what you're doing. So they both run a company called Sierra. You may have heard a lot in the last 3 months about the buzzword of, oh, AI is going to become agents. These guys were talking to me about agents long before that. Talk about what Sierra is doing, and again, one of my big concerns is this AI that makes stuff up. We're going to give it more power. So talk about not just what you're doing at Sierra, but how you're doing it.
I'll start with the what, which is really simple. So at Sierra, we help primarily consumer brands build customer-facing AI agents that don't just answer questions, but actually can take action on your behalf. So if you have ADT home security at your house and you're having a problem with your alarm, you'll now chat with the ADT AI. I think that's remarkable because the T in ADT actually stands for telegraph. So this is a company that started with a technology innovation, and we are privileged to deliver them AI for the first time. If you have SiriusXM in your car, you'll now chat with Harmony, who is their AI agent to manage your subscription. Or if you have a Sonos speaker and you're having trouble with it, you'll chat with the Sonos AI. These are all powered by Sierra. So we're really focusing on helping companies build their branded AI agent. And I think we'll get deeper on what agents are and what they aren't and what's hard and what's easy. Our view is, simply put, that your AI agent will become as relevant as your website or your mobile app as a digital artifact that you publish to the world to engage with your customers. And all the care and attention that you put into your website, and you have entire teams working on it, we think you'll have similarly sized teams putting that effort into a conversational AI. We both have near teenagers, and when they get added to your car insurance premium in a handful of years, you'll chat. Ouch. I know. And by the way,
I'm still dealing with 50. Don't bring on the kid driving.
Wait until you see the cost of adding a child to your car insurance. That'll really shock you. But I think you'll actually chat with your insurance company's AI agent rather than clicking around their website to do that. So we're really, really excited about it. And how we do it, and I'll try to be short just because I think this is sort of the purpose of this discussion, is I think agent means a lot of different things. The word agent comes from the word agency. It essentially means affording this AI the opportunity to not just follow a set of rules, but make decisions, express some creativity. In the domain that we're working in, I would say it's a little simpler than a research problem. It's one of the reasons why so many of these mainstream brands have adopted our platform, because how you fix a Sonos speaker is a well-defined standard operating procedure. How you return a pair of shoes at Olokai is a well-established process. So while there is some agency afforded, it's not the same level of generalization that some research-oriented agents have. And broadly speaking, as we get in today, I think there's a lot of applications that are shovel-ready now, both in terms of brand risk, safety risk, and that's really where I think we're focusing on. There's a lot of things that I think are quite interesting, actually, that we're not focused on, but the word agent is used for all of them. So,
and for you all, we're talking, in a lot of cases, customer support, service, the kinds of things that have had call centers with humans often reading from scripts to begin with, which I suspect is part of why it's so ripe for automation. Talk about what, in addition to generative AI, is required, because we saw some early examples of when this is done wrong.
Yeah.
We saw, I believe Air Canada is still paying for some free flights because they turned a chatbot loose. Somebody in Canada's got a car for $1 because they negotiated it with their chatbot.
Yeah, I think the example you're citing was Air Canada had a seemingly generative AI-based chatbot up, and a gentleman wrote in, and I think it had a member of his family pass away, and the chatbot was apparently more empathetic and understanding than whatever their standard policy is, and said, it's a full refund, no problem. It just completely made that up, right? So that's not, in fact, their bereavement policy. And So you obviously don't want an AI that is representing your company and your brand to your customers making stuff up. And so, I think you're right to put a spotlight on this, and it's a problem area that we at Sierra have really run towards. And there's no silver bullet. And so the approach we've taken is to layer different elements within our platform. Starting with, for instance, when an agent is making access to a customer record or a flight record, that is done through deterministic APIs, right? Good old-fashioned software where the company can enforce business logic and all of those important things around it. One of the more interesting approaches we've taken is we have a saying, the solution to many problems with AI is more AI. And so we've actually introduced this notion of supervisor agents. Think of them almost as like Jiminy Cricket agents that look over the shoulder of the primary agent. Is this factual? Is this on policy? And so on. And then finally, we've developed a number of techniques. Brett mentioned these kind of standard operating procedures, or how do you do a return? How do you do a warranty? How do you help someone find a plan or a program that's better for them? Where we can express those very complex procedures in a way that acts as kind of an instruction manual for the AI, and we're able to keep it following those instructions, and yet not fall into kind of the robotic traps and conversation cul-de-sacs that I think we're all familiar with from using chatbots of yesteryear. So a layered approach.
And the business model too is, if I recall, pretty interesting, which is you basically get paid when AI can solve the problem. So it's in your guys' interest to take on problems that AI can solve, right? You get paid if a customer interaction is handled entirely through Sierra's AI and doesn't require a human. Is that?
That's right. And if you look at the history of software, these technology shifts have really changed business models as well. We used to go to Fry's Electronics, buy a box of software. Fry's was one of my favorite places in Palo Alto, by the way. I say that with great affection.
R.I.P. Fry's.
I know. I used to build all my computers with parts from Fry's. And then, the birth of the cloud happened, and we got software as a service, where not only did we subscribe to software, but we came to expect the updates from software, which sort of changed our relationship as customers of software and vendors of software. Our view of AI is that it actually can complete a job. So why not pay for those outcomes rather than pay for the privilege of using software? And at Sierra, we think you should not pay for software, you should pay for a job well done. And that's why how we're charging for Sierra.
And you all have found a sweet spot, again, a set of tasks that the AI seems relatively ready to handle, especially when you combine hard-coded logic with the generative and have a supervision system, have some hard-coded limits. When you hear the talk industry-wide, now agents has become the buzzword. Everyone's doing agents.
It happened very quickly.
It did.
It went from no one was talking about to literally every company.
We were actually worried when we announced the company that anyone would understand what we're talking about.
Congratulations. That's not the problem. But everyone and their mother is doing an agent. My mom's here in the front. I don't think she's doing an AI agent.
Mrs. Freed, yeah.
But there's a lot of talk. And am I right in thinking that while AI may be ready to have agency in some domains, am I also right in being worried that the same technology that's still making things up as a chatbot isn't ready to be given broad agency?
I think there are two parts to that. One is, in what domain are you using an agent? So just between the three of us, the set of things we might want a personal agent, one type of agent, to do is enormous, right? It's just an incredibly vast surface area, from booking travel to appointments to making decisions about where you're going to go to school or what class you're going to take. So huge domain. And so I think in broad open-ended domains, it's challenging because how do you ensure, right, that the agent will stay on task, do the right thing across that vast surface area? Broadly, we think of there being three types of agents. Personal agents, which will emerge over the next several years from the likes of Google and Meta and so on. Second are role-based agents, so agents like Cursor or a Copilot, a flavor of it, where you're asking the agent to do a specific job, I think are more well-suited to the technology.
Or Harvey in the legal profession, where
that's right.
The job of, say, a paralegal.
That's right. And then we think the third category, these branded customer-facing agents that really expose the functionality and capability of a company, which is much more limited. So I think the narrower the surface area, I think the more conducive that is to agents today.
And broadly, by the way, and sorry for interrupting, Clay, but this is why I'm actually really excited about sort of the applied AI space, because I think as a research problem, to build an agent that can do anything and not have the downsides that you're alluding to continues to be a research problem. It's an important research problem, but it's not solved, and I think there's a lot of risk. In contrast, if you're, say, a company like Cursor, we're a customer of that company that's making a coding agent, that's a much more narrow domain. And there's a lot of research and development there, but there's also a lot of engineering, and I think when you narrow the domain and you can really understand what the guardrails are necessary to actually have something be successful. So in marketing, in legal, in software engineering, in customer experience, and customer service, these are the types of areas that have some really, I think, exciting companies emerging because they're taking this very general problem, which is an important research problem, say, hey, we're going to engineer a solution for this domain. And I think a lot of those applications are ready now, and we use them almost all at our company.
So I think you all wisely decided you wanted to be in the applied side of the space and not competing with the many companies that are trying to build the underlying technology, although as we'll get into in a minute or two, you are the chair of OpenAI, which is one of those companies. How do you see that frontier evolving? Right now, you've built it so that you can use multiple models, Sierra, right? Some your own, some from others. Do you think we have, a couple of years from now, do you think we have still Google, Amazon, Meta, Anthropic, OpenAI, Microsoft, all sort of, it seems like they're getting similar results?
My view is that the AI market will rhyme with the cloud market a little bit in how it plays out, where there will be a very small handful of companies building frontier models and doing the pre-training process and the capital expenditures required for building these very large models. And that will sort of rhyme with the cloud infrastructure market, Azure, GCP, Amazon Web Services. Then there will be a whole lot of companies building tools for people who are building AI applications or AI solutions like Snowflake and DataBricks, or AI native companies like Scale and others. And then there will be a very large number of applications companies like software as a service that are not necessarily AI companies, though they are in some ways, depending on the lens you look at it through, but they're actually just solving a problem. They just happen to be using AI to do that. And if you look at the cloud market, I actually don't know the math of how much spend is at the software as a service level versus the infrastructure as a service level, but taxes are collected all the way down, right? Most of the software as a service companies run in the cloud as well. And the reason I think it will play out that way is I do think the CapEx required to build these large foundation and frontier models is such that it really only makes sense for these research labs in affiliation with folks like Microsoft and Amazon Web Services can really do that in a sane financial structure. And I do think that if you talk to any mainstream company, they don't want to buy technology, they want to buy solutions to their problems. And I think that's why software as a service existed. And I think that's why there's so much excitement around agents, is I think that's actually a form factor that is a really great way to consume this technology if you're not a tech company and you're not trying to build things from scratch.
And Clay, what's next for you all? So you have these early customers where you're doing the customer service work. Talk about, I imagine usually when you talk to a startup, you're hearing the beginning of their vision, not the full thing. What are some things that you imagine Sierra might be able to do, and what technology do you need to mature to do that?
There are a couple dimensions to it. One is just the breadth of the customer experience that Sierra can aid our customers and their customers with. And so we began fairly narrowly with customer service, customer support. What was exciting and surprising to us was just how quickly our customers pulled us into things adjacent and even afar from that. And so, for instance, the Olokai agent, Olokai makes kind of Hawaiian Island-inspired footwear and apparel, can advise on products. I'm going to a wedding and I need a pair of loafers that would work on the beach. What should I get? And you can just ask that, right, in natural language. It can even advise on where you might want to visit, right, on the islands. And so product recommendations and things around that. Sonos is a really interesting case where we're helping not just with troubleshooting, but actually helping you get your system up and running. And so more complexity and nuance in helping you get the most out of your product. And I'm excited to span the whole journey from setup and sign up and getting you activated and successful on a product or service, all the way to, if something's not working for you, helping a plan that's right and better for you, which is something we're doing with several of our subscriptions businesses. The other dimension is modality. So we started with chat. In October, we announced and launched voice support. And in B2C businesses, roughly 80% of all customer contacts happen with voice, right? You want to talk to someone. It's so ergonomic. It's so easy if you can get a hold of someone. And so voice, we think, is going to be a really, really big deal for our customers. And one interesting thing is, like, gosh, if the cost of a phone call goes down by an order of magnitude,
Or 2 orders of magnitude.
or 2 orders of magnitude, do you have 10 times as many phone calls with your customers? It's bizarre to us that today there are websites devoted to helping you track down the hidden 800 numbers, right? So that you can actually talk to a company that you do business with. Your customers want to speak to you. We're excited about helping the great companies of the world have more conversations with their customers.
So I mentioned in my intro that we've had some scheduling changes. One of those is Sarah Fryer, the CFO of OpenAI, was supposed to be here. She was unfortunately unavailable. Then Jason Kwan was supposed to be here, the Chief Strategy Officer. He got sick. So we won't have someone specifically from the company, but fortunately, we already happen to have Brett Taylor on stage.
You'll have to settle for me.
He's the chairman of the board of OpenAI. So I did want to take some time. Clay, you can relax a bit while I grill. But feel free to help me.
I'm actually going to defer most questions to him.
Excellent.
Yeah.
First of all, it's, you came onto the board a year ago. There was, I believe, some stuff. Somebody got fired, somebody got hired. Anyway.
I read about it, yeah.
Talk about, because you've now, for those who don't know, in addition to his very impressive career as a tech executive, Brett has also more recently become known as, like, if you want to be on an interesting board, it's anyone that he's on. Your last one was Twitter. So you have some experience in this. What was it like joining the board? What are some of your early impressions? What did you know, and what have you learned?
It was a very unusual experience for everyone involved. From my vantage point, which was only one of the vantage points in it, Sam was fired. There was sort of a letter from many employees in the company saying that they were going to leave, and I was brought in to sort of mediate a resolution to that between the outgoing board and the management team in the company. Clay was my second phone call after my wife when I got that call from the board and Sam, and I'm basically having the conversation as, hey, I think I'm in a very unique position to be able to help here, but the cost to Sierra wouldn't be zero. Should we do it? And one of the interesting outcomes of that conversation was just how much the existence of OpenAI was so meaningful to us personally, and even to the existence of Sierra. I think many people in this room are probably here in large part because of ChatGPT, indirectly or directly, just its influence on the world. And I just couldn't imagine that organization disappearing. It just was so meaningful to the history of software as we know it, and such a unique sort of a quirk of history that this research lab has come to define the future of technology as it has. And so I joined in part because I did feel like I was in a unique position to help, and I'm really happy I did. What have I learned? One is, it's a nonprofit research lab, so it's very mission driven, and I think a lot of companies say they're mission driven. I've never been at a place that is so singularly focused on a mission to ensure that artificial general intelligence benefits humanity. And then similarly, I've never been on a board where you'll have researchers talking about advanced research for more than half the time. And this is the organization. So it's been a fascinating experience for me. And as I said, for me personally, I'm just grateful that it exists, and it's been fun to see the 12 days of shipmess going on right now, and to see kind of a revitalization. To all the reporters, we don't like the idea of 12 days of news. But anyway, we like a little news. Yeah. 12 days might be much. So one of the things that's interesting is it's not your typical board. No, lots of the boards you've been on aren't your typical board, but this one in particular, it's a nonprofit board. How do you think about your responsibility? Because it's not just about creating value for shareholders. How do you think of, who are you responsible to, and what are you responsible for? Well, it's not just about that, it's not at all about that, actually. So, we're a nonprofit, and what that means is our fiduciary duty is actually to the mission, not to shareholders. And so The mission of OpenAI is to ensure that artificial general intelligence benefits humanity. And that's complicated because shareholders are well-identified people who you can talk to. And a mission, on the other hand, is something that can be interpreted. And I think that's in part why mission-driven organizations, not just OpenAI, Anthropic, and others, they take different corporate structures, but I would say they're all very mission-driven places. What that mission means is something of an ink blot test to the person reading it. When I say ensure AGI benefits humanity, some of you might go immediately to safety, which is a very reasonable perspective. Some other people might go towards the digital divide and job displacement, which is another very reasonable perspective. And it's kind of all of those things. And so the board is we consider ourselves sort of stewards of that mission and ensuring that all the actions we take, all the investments we make are all steering the world towards AGI that benefits humanity. So it's very interesting, it's very heady. I mean, it's just a different level of societal obligation than you'd have in a typical company.
So one of the things that the board's been pretty clear is going on, when Sam returned, I had a phone call with, I think it was Sam and Mira that night, that Sam came back to the board, that they were going to look at the corporate structure, among other things. One of the issues is, it is currently a nonprofit. In the last investment round, the investors were basically promised that if we don't convert to more of a for-profit structure within 2 years, we can ask for our money back. They might not want it, but they have that option. The company said it's exploring that. How do you think of it? Like, to me, I'm thinking, well, it's kind of like a sale almost, in that, if the nonprofit is going to give up ownership of this really valuable entity, it probably needs to be compensated the way somebody would if they were selling an asset. Is that the right way to think about it? Or how do you think about managing your fiduciary duties to the nonprofit while helping in this restructuring?
Yeah, I mean, it's directionally the right way to think about it. And just to clear up, I think, some misconceptions. First, we haven't figured it all out yet, so I can't speak to all the specifics, in part just because we don't know all the details of how it will end up. I'll start with why are we even thinking about it in the first place. One is to build AGI that benefits all of humanity. It requires billions of dollars in OpEx and CapEx to do that. And that's not a type of thing a traditional nonprofit can raise. It really requires a different corporate structure. And that's something that sort of preceded my joining the board, but just, I think when the organization started, it wasn't obvious the level of infrastructure investment necessary to invest in AI. And so as we think about the mission, we want to set up a corporate structure that enables the company to achieve its mission. So that's how we're starting with all the discussions that we're having. And the second thing, there's been some reports where sort of the nonprofit is turning into a for-profit. That's also not true. Right now, there's a nonprofit and a for-profit in one corporate structure, and we're thinking about how to reconfigure that. And we're trying to set up the nonprofit to actually be more sustainable and extremely well-financed. So all the issues that you sort of alluded to.
And it could own a stake in something for
it absolutely could, and that's the way we're thinking about it. And we are solely fiduciaries of the nonprofit, so that's the lens that there's lots of stakeholders in this, investors, employees. My job as chairman of the board is to focus on the not-for-profit. So I'm excited about it. I think there's actually a way to set this up, which sets the nonprofit up to be more sustainable, extremely well-financed, and actually, as we think about, I mentioned that mission is such a wide surface area. Can we actually address more of it in a different corporate structure? And I actually am quite optimistic that we can. So a lot to figure out, and I can't be more specific just because I want to make sure that we sort of have the space to figure out those details. But we want to set up the not-for-profit to be successful. The most important thing is the mission and ensuring that we're setting up this organization to achieve it in all of its facets. And
you mentioned the mission and that a lot of people at the company are mission-driven. We've also seen a lot of significant departures over the last year. How do you approach that as a board member? I mean, it's got to be concerning, right?
Anytime someone, and some people have left, are some of the best researchers in the world, so of course I care. I try to, wherever possible, have conversations with them individually to hear them out. And I think if you zoom out a lot, 3 years ago, OpenAI was a research lab that you knew, but probably many people outside of this room did not, right? And it's gone from a small research lab to, one could argue, the most important technology organization in the world in a very, very short period of time. And you've been covering startups for most of your career as a reporter.
Since you were starting them.
Since I was starting them. And a very fast-growing company it's challenging. You end up scaling people, processes, impact, and it naturally leads to both incredible impact and some chaos. And you've seen it in some of the great companies have had it. So, we're not without our flaws, but I think broadly what's been very inspiring to me is seeing the impact of the alumni of OpenAI, which I personally am very proud of, but also just seeing the continued momentum of OpenAI. You joked about being exhausted by the 12 days of shipments. I think it's really neat that OpenAI just continues to be at the frontier of what defines our expectations about what AI can do. And I'm just so incredibly proud of the OpenAI team for their continued execution on the mission. So, but one thing just to state it though is, when someone disagrees with our interpretation of the mission, I try to listen. I think the worst thing I could do in my role is have sort of an ossified view of what our mission is, or even a defensiveness that we're doing it the right way. We might not be, and I actually think one of my main obligations is to listen. And so I don't always agree, but I actually think that as stewards of a mission that is so ambitious, I always try to deeply listen. And so I think being self-critical is extremely important when the impact of your technology is so large. So, and actually I would say a lot of the leadership team, I've seen that value in them as well.
Well, I would love to keep talking with these two. These are two of my favorite people to talk to about AI, but I've been getting this sign flashing for a few minutes that says wrap up. So I am going to do that, but I look forward to hearing what Sierra's up to next, and certainly whatever drama comes forth, or products, or both, from OpenAI. And thank you both very much.
You're welcome, and happy birthday.
Happy birthday.
Thanks. Thanks so much. So we're going to shift gears a bit to another thing that I am very excited about. At our AI Plus Summit in San Francisco last November, we hosted a segment that paired an AI-powered robot dog with an actual dog, and we saw how the dog and the robot dog got along. That was fun. It was interesting from a technology standpoint, but I'm really excited by this next project, which is doing something far more organic. No, I'm teasing something that's coming later, so you all will really be excited when I come back later to talk about how AI can help us communicate with animals. But that's not what's happening now, so I'm going to walk off stage.
Give it up for Axios cybersecurity reporter Sam Sabin.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. I wish I could treat you to a speaking dog, but that might be later in the program. Instead, I have the distinct honor of talking about a technology that you all, if you are based in San Francisco, spend a lot of time in San Francisco, probably know really well and perhaps took to this very event, Waymo. So many of you have probably driven in these cars or been driven by these cars, but we might not actually really understand or think about the AI that is powering it. So to kind of get under the hood, pun intended, we have Waymo's David Marginetz here to talk more about it. So David, come on out. Thanks for being here. So David, I understand you came ready with some snazzy visuals that are going to help us understand the scale and growth of Waymo and also what it sees. So maybe to start, tell us a little bit about just how Waymo is scaled and how you were able to achieve that.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Waymo's been around for a long time. We started as the Google self-driving car project in 2009, graduated to our own company in 2015, took the first fully autonomous public trip on public roads after that, and have been scaling methodically since then. One of the things that, there hasn't been a silver bullet that's really helped us to achieve that scale. We started with a foundation of safety, but really we had to leverage cutting edge technology to be able to handle everything that's thrown at us on public roads. And that includes machine learning models and more recently, artificial intelligence.
Totally.
And so I'd like to take the opportunity to talk a little bit about that technology today and walk you through some of the events that really illustrate it.
Yeah, let's do it. Yeah.
And so let me first talk a little bit about some of the technology that goes into the Waymo driver, starting with what it sees. So we start out with camera, which gives us this full color representation of the world. On top of that, we layer in LiDAR, which uses laser points bounced off of objects. We use the speed of light to tell how far away those are, and that gives us this 3D structure of the world, helps us understand the speed and heading of objects in it. And when the weather is inclement, we also add on radar. Those last two were perspective views. This is a top-down view of what the Waymo driver sees. And this helps us to see through fog and rain, and also helps us to see fast-moving objects that might not yet be visible to the camera or LiDAR. Now, these three different sensors come together and are all essential. They come together in our perception stack. And so you can see in the upper right here that we're labeling and representing every single object that's important for us to understand in the scene. We label pedestrians, vehicles, road paint, traffic signs, traffic lights, et cetera. And those are all handed over to our behavior module, which has two main goals. One is predicting the behavior of all of the objects in the scene so that we know where they're going to be as we start to traverse near them. And then secondly, planning a path through the scene. So both the trajectory as well as our speed along that trajectory. Now, these are the things that are happening on board, but none of them would be possible without our simulation capabilities, where everything comes together. We're able to test our software, put it through its paces through millions of miles of simulated driving, and make sure that the Waymo driver is ready for prime time, ready for being shipped to public roads, and ready for all of our users who've grown so used to using the service.
Totally, and I think this is all so cool. It sometimes feels like magic, but of course there are many challenges that come with this. Maybe walk us through some of that and how you guys kind of work through those.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So there are maybe two classes of challenges, I would say. On the first hand, we have kind of the nominal driving that we do. So lane changes, turns, climbing up and down the steep streets of San Francisco. And we were able to build a machine learning model that attacks all of those different maneuvers very smoothly and confidently, right? For anyone who's driven in a Waymo, this is the feel of the Waymo driver that really builds trust in all of our users. But at the same time, we're driving the equivalent of several human lifetimes of driving every single week. And that means that we get to see all of the edge cases and these rare scenarios that the world throws at us. If you just think about the wildest thing that you've seen on public roads ever, that's something that we experience almost every single day. And some examples would be these stray cyclists, or a skateboarder who falls in the road in front of us, a barbecue that fell off of a truck at full speed on the freeway. I don't need to tell you about San Francisco's wild weather. If you were here last weekend, we had a tornado warning. Here's a tree that fell down in front of us. And I think what this really illustrates is that the challenge of autonomous driving is not just in the driving task, but really in understanding all of the objects in the world around us and how we're intended to interact with them. So these are just some really short scenes. What I also wanted to bring here is a walkthrough of three events that I think really help to illustrate the importance of machine learning and artificial intelligence in the Waymo driver. This first one was a very recent event. It actually took place last week in Austin, which is one of our latest cities that we're rider-only or fully autonomous in. Just to orient you around the screen, this is what our cameras are seeing in the vehicle. And then up here is the representation from perception. I'm going to point your direction to this scooter rider that's in the road just in front of us as I hit play. You can see she's riding and then all of a sudden stumbles into the road in front of us. Now, in order to be able to react to a situation like this, a number of things have to come together extremely rapidly. First, I mentioned behavior prediction. Our behavior prediction needs to go from predicting her behavior as somebody on a scooter to a pedestrian who's briefly lost control and is stumbling into the lane in front of us. And then I go back to our path planning module, where it needs to understand the physics of the vehicle, the capabilities of the car, and balance a hard brake, which in this case takes place at about a half G of braking, along with a strong swerve over to the left, which is about a third of a G. And so doing both of those actions at the same time is just not something that humans are typically expected to do. I don't know that I would be confident that I could accomplish this, in this scene.
Totally.
Going to our next example, this is one that every single parent in the audience is absolutely going to resonate with. Without more introduction, I'm just going to point your attention to this line of parked cars on the right here. And as we can see, this girl just about darts into the road ahead of us. Once again, an illustration of the importance of behavior prediction and understanding those actors. We made a decision relatively early on in our behavior prediction model to train it separately on adults versus children, precisely because of scenes like this and the fact that children don't have the same appreciation for the danger in the road, and the fact that we need to be somewhat more conservative around their behavior. Also, this is a great illustration of why it's important to have a driver that is never drunk, never texting, always paying attention, and ready to react at a moment's notice. This last scene here, we've changed the representation of the perception model here to illustrate what we call the pedestrian key points here, right? So essentially what this is kind of a model of a human in kind of this hangman or stick figure type form. And the reason that's important is because this is a demonstration of our system's need to understand the intent of pedestrians who are directing traffic. It isn't just about physics. It isn't just about sort of the road rules of the paint on the road or the traffic signals, which in this case they're out. We need to be able to understand that motions like this mean stop, motions like this, as the official directs us to, means go. And this is something that the Waymo driver is able to accomplish completely on its own. So hopefully those three short scenes help to demonstrate the capabilities of the vehicle, and also why it's really important that we have this more generalized level of intelligence implemented in our system.
Totally. And I think with our last minute or so, I'm going to hit you with the question on everyone's mind, right? Is Waymo today safer than a human driver?
So we looked at the data, and the data confidently points to yes. So breaking down this slide, we looked at our first 25 million miles of fully autonomous driving. This is nobody behind the driver's seat, nobody able to take over. And we compared it to human driving in the same geographies and on the same types of roads, which is really the only way that you can get an apples to apples or accurate representation of the safety. We looked at how many incidents of three types the Waymo driver had versus humans, again in that apples to apples comparison. And what we found was that we had 81% fewer airbag deployments, 72% reduction in injury causing crashes, and a 57% reduction in police reported crashes. And so that all adds up to, in this case, like 67 fewer injury causing crashes, which you might say, hey, David, 25 million miles, only 67 fewer crashes, like that's a relatively small number. I'd say two things to that. One, if you're one of these 67 people, you're not in back pain, you can still play with your kids, and you don't have some kind of a disfigurement from your crash, that means the world to you. And those are the people that we're fighting for every single day. But at the same time, these are small numbers. This is only the beginning. It's only 25 million miles. And that really points us to the next phase in our scaling, which is that we want to scale this massively, bring the Waymo driver to as many human-driven miles as we can. If you want to dig into these numbers anymore, we publish all kinds of papers at waymo.com/safety. Take a look there. And if you're inspired by this, please take a look at our careers page. Jump on the ride with us. We would love to hear from you.
Awesome. Well, David, thank you so much for taking the time. I'm sure, hopefully, many of us feel a little bit better about getting into a Waymo around San Francisco. And I believe we will have a quick word from one of our sponsors right after this, so please stick around, and then I'll be right back on stage. So don't miss me. I'll be here in like 2 minutes, so don't worry about it. So thank you.
Thank you.
Up next, our View from the Top moderator, Axios publisher Nicholas Johnston.
Oh, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Nicholas Johnson, the publisher of Axios. Thank you so much for joining us. This is our second year in San Francisco for a big AI summit. It's great to be back here. I love these events, the physical manifestation of our journalism. We get to see that all of you, our readers, are actual human people, and you all get to see that Ina Fried is an actual human person, not some LLM sent from the future to write newsletters. So thank you so much for being here today. We're also hugely grateful to all of our partners. Nothing that we do at Axios, all the investments in journalism, events like this would be possible without the support of our partners. We've got a handful of them with us today that I'll be having leading conversations with, and I want to kick it off with Meta and the Vice President of Product Management of Meta, Sue Young. Sue, welcome to the Axios stage. Welcome.
Yeah.
Thanks for joining us. Meta, you folks joined us last year. Update us on this journey you've been on, making Meta AI one of the world's most popular AI assistants.
Yeah, so it's wonderful to be on this journey with you all since we're here, so you can keep us accountable. But I think Mark just recently shared we're nearly at 600 million people using our product every single month, which is wild. If you think back about a year ago, we were just a couple million people. So I think the growth that we've seen has been pretty incredible. And I think a lot of that has been really just giving utility and access to where people are spending time. So some of the key products around Instagram, Messenger, WhatsApp, Facebook, we really leaned into the utility of product and really tried to integrate Meta AI where people are today.
I mean, a growth line like that, what are the challenges of meeting that response, adjusting to how users use it, seeing how they break it, and how do you keep it running?
Yeah, I think iterating with that many people is obviously comes with some pros and some challenges. So on one hand, we do see a ton of value where Meta AI is actually getting people to use our apps even more often. But then we also know that some of the core flows, if it is a new experience that we're introducing to people.
Right.
But I think one of the things that we're really pushing on is just learning as much as we can, iterating as quickly as possible. And so I think you'll continue to see a lot of iteration and execution and just making the product continue to be better.
So speaking of product evolution, vision and voice is coming into it. Tell us about that.
Yes, vision and voice, we launched that at Connect this year. And so, I'm personally biased just from spending a bunch of years in the AR space, but, even before two thumbs could text, we always had vision and voice. They're just faster, easier, more natural ways of communication. And so really bringing that to the AI products was something that I personally was really excited about. On voice, we really emphasized and focused on quality. We really wanted to make the voice natural and conversational. We worked really closely with public figures and as well as professional actors to really make the voice experience really positive. On vision, we know that people love asking questions of their photos. If they see something, they want to know more about it. I personally love editing photos in my chat groups with my friends. It's such a fun experience. And so we're seeing a lot more depth of engagement with.
And is this part of, I guess, maybe the longer term journey for these kinds of AI tools is making them more like, I don't want to use this, well I do, but like humans, right? Where they have the same kind of inputs and outputs that any of us would. So it can be more seamlessly integrated in how you live your life?
Yeah, I think what you'll see is that over time, two things probably. One is just we want to really just meet people where they are. I think if people are using voice or using vision, and if we can provide a more natural and contextual experience, we want to make it as easy as possible to use. But then I also think you're going to see a lot of improvement on just making the experience more relevant to you. Whether or not it's really pushing on how intelligence, on how personalized, how creative. And I think making sure that it's really a core part of what is going to be valuable in your day-to-day is something that is the bar that we're going to continue to execute.
So with 600 people using it, what can you tell us about who's using it, why they're using it? What have you learned about the user base?
Yeah, I think one of the largest use case that we see to date is learning. People want to ask, get general knowledge on things. They want to learn new things. And so even in, I just saw a report from people who went to India and just, we are democratizing information, which I think is just such a powerful tool for so many people around the world. I think another piece is just creativity and just creation. So I was just at an event the other day, and someone was telling me how he was using AI to create new jerseys for his daughter's soccer team.
Right.
And then also just, probably like the regular day-to-day use cases I have, whether or not it's, building out a new workout to like build more muscle, to cooking, for a large family meal, or even like what to buy for the holidays. So I think, really, being there for any of the things that you need to a little extra guidance on or to ask a question.
Are there things in the user data or the profile that surprised you? Types of users, ages, demographics, particular use cases that have seemed really interesting, or you scratch your head being like, I didn't think they'd use it like that, but users can surprise you sometimes, right?
I think in terms of like kind of the core use cases, I mentioned some of the examples to date, but I think that one of the most fascinating pieces is just like what the engagement and how people are using it across each of the apps and also across each of the markets. And so I think that's one thing that, we're so early in this journey for Meta AI, and I think AI in generally, that I think that just the depth of the experience that you're going to get, whether or not you're using voice in the US or as a young adult, or if you're, on the older demographic in WhatsApp, or if you're in Indonesia where we're rolling out, as we speak, I think you're just going to see a wide range of use cases.
Like, almost like how users get used to it, a younger demographic. If you ever type to an AI, it's just going to be like, why are you typing? I'll just talk.
Well, just the intent is going to be indifferent. Like one of my favorite categories are these like adulting use cases. Like, how do I get a driver's license? How do I renew my passport? Like your life stage, you're going to have different complex questions, and so we want to be the assistant that you trust throughout that journey.
Being a place where people can turn for those kinds of questions. Well, let's spin it a little bit forward here. Okay, we're a year in, we're a little 600 million users. What does 2025 look like?
Yeah, I think you'll continue to see, continued improvements on like some of the capabilities. Like voice is something that, I think there's we're just early in that journey. We shared some of our early video editing capabilities with Movie Gen, and so continue to push on some of these like multimodalities is something I think that's like a core part of the assistant experience. But generally, I think, given just where the technology is today, I think one of the most valuable things of this technology is to give people a world-class assistant that they trust. And so if we are successful, one of the key things that I hope to see through this year is that when you use our services, not only do you have an assistant to help get things done for you, but beyond Meta AI, that I think creators have and can build an AI assistant to help connect with their community, or businesses can create AIs to help connect with their customers, and then all developers have like a world-class model that they can build.
Not just broadening that relationship, but deepening it across all of those different places.
Yes, exactly.
Well, at Axios, we love to end our newsletters on one fun thing. Up here, I like to end on one fun thing as well. Let's make it one AI thing.
Okay.
Tell us your lived experience. How are you using it? What's a cool use case that you've found?
One of my favorite things, I think, so I drive to work, is using voice. As I feel redundant, but using voice on my drive to work. I'll ask the top headlines. I'll ask follow-up questions, based on like what I'm hearing, or if I have a complex technical topic that I need to know, I'll ask questions too. The best is if my kids are in the car, they'll jump in too with 20 questions, which is an endless game you can play with Meta AI with kids in the back of the car. So I think just using it.
Like having an extra super smart passenger sitting next to you.
Exactly.
To play with you and your
Exactly. But I know we have a bunch of things set up downstairs, so definitely hope you all can like.
Absolutely. When we're done, we'll go downstairs, we'll play with it ourselves. Sue, thanks so much for being here. Thanks for Meta for being one of our partners making today possible. Stick around, the conversation continues.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Returning to the stage, Sam Sabin.
Me again. Hi, guys. I told you not to miss me. I'm right back. Our next guest is a driving force behind tech innovation at one of the biggest companies in the world. You perhaps have heard of them and maybe even went there for some holiday shopping already this week. It's Walmart. As Executive Vice President of Global Technology Platforms at Walmart Global Tech, our next guest is creating ways to enhance the retail experience for millions worldwide. Please welcome Shravana Karnati. Thanks for being here.
Glad to be here.
Awesome. So let's get to it. A big part of your job, and I think will be super helpful for people to hear, is understanding how AI can actually help your employees, help the teams across Walmart. I've been to Bentonville. It is a huge operation, even in Arkansas alone. So maybe to start and to help kind of level set for those who only know Walmart from, going to the stores or shopping online, tell us a little bit about how your team has been implementing generative AI behind the scenes across the enterprise, and what some of the best use cases have been so far.
Yeah, sure, Sam. Great to be here. Thanks for being here, all of you. At Walmart, if you look at Gen AI, it almost seems like it touches every area that we operate in, right? But we have 5 major focus areas. One is customer experience. The second one is associate productivity. Very important. We're a people-led, tech-powered company. Operations, there are immense opportunities over there as well to apply Gen AI. That remains a focus. And content enrichment is another key area for us. And last but not least, developer productivity.
Yeah.
As a people-led company, one of the first things we did was to launch a tool called My Assistant. This is a Gen AI-powered assistant that our associates could use to answer questions that they have about their employment, the benefits, or what have you. And this has been rolled out to 13 countries. 50,000 associates are using it. About 1.5 million queries have been fielded so far, and the usage continues to improve. And by the way, this is something we launched just a couple of months after all the buzz around ChatGPT and so forth. So we are one of the early adopters of Gen AI technology. And it's one more example I will give you on the shopping side, customer experience side. We have launched a shopping assistant on our site who loves to interact with e-commerce applications, e-commerce sites, like a computer. If you want to look for a toy for a 10-year-old girl, we are trained to say toy, girl, 10-year. You almost become computer yourself in interacting with the computer.
Yeah.
And what the shopping assistant does is to allow you to interact in a more natural language fashion. You could ask full sentences and so forth. Now we are experimenting with it. We've launched it in beta. It'll see widespread sort of adoption and evolution next year.
Awesome. I guess then, I have heard from so many companies or consultants who are still even concerned today about how to implement AI and especially generative AI into their back-end systems, right? They are worried about proprietary data being sucked in. They're worried about employees being able to access confidential info that maybe they shouldn't be able to access. You name it, they are concerned. Walmart was an early adopter, to your point. Walk us through that decision and kind of what you all were considering when you were weighing, okay, should Walmart, one of the biggest countries in the world, I keep saying country, it's a company. Could
Maybe
be a country.
With 2.1 to 2.4 million
it could be a small
people,
country.
associates.
Right,
It almost feels like that.
Right. But, what went into that decision?
Yeah, I mean, so it's a fair question.
Yeah.
It's one that I hear a lot. But I think the possibilities with Gen AI are so immense that I think we need to move fast, but do it right as well. Not doing it right could potentially cause huge reputational damage and could result in disastrous results for any company should sensitive information leak out and so forth. One of the things we do is we are a people-led company. Everything that we do is grounded in our sort of purpose, mission, and values. And what we did was early on, we assembled a team consisting of digital citizenship, privacy experts, information security experts, and so forth, technologies included, in figuring out what would be the framework to sort of evaluate these technologies, these applications that people might be building pretty soon, and how would we evaluate them, how would we test them, how would we look at the data, how would we look at the purpose of those tools, and what mechanisms would we put in place to ensure that when the applications are actually delivered, that they're doing the right thing. Right. So to that extent, being a tech-powered company, one of the first things we did was to create a platform called Element AI that allows you to sort of embed best-of-breed large language models in it, and at the same time allows you to sort of automatically take care of a lot of the privacy, information security considerations as well. And the tool also allows you to deploy to any target environment, whether it is on-prem, cloud, etc. So it is a very powerful tool, homegrown, that brings best-of-breed technologies together and allows us to customize the way we do things and allows us to move fast.
Yeah, I'm sitting here, and this was not on my list of questions I sent you, so if you don't have the numbers, that's okay. But I'm sitting here and I'm remembering that, Walmart is known to consumers as a giant retailer, but you all are also a huge tech company, right? I would love to hear a little bit about the breakdown of the team that you oversee, like how many people are working on this and what that kind of looks like.
It's actually hard to say how many people are working on it. So we have about 25 to 30,000 global tech associates. Out of that, maybe 20 to 25,000 are actively engaged in development. And this is worldwide, both in the US and in our markets, where we have a large international operation as well. And pretty much everything that our teams are touching now involves machine learning, some way of AI, Gen AI, and so forth. So it's hard to say how many people are working on it, but we have hundreds of data scientists across the company, both in technology and in business. And we have hundreds of developers, thousands of developers engaged in building machine learning tools and machine learning applications and Gen AI applications.
Totally, which helps you all to be able to deploy this quickly, build this quickly, things like that. So for any company that is sitting here going, oh my God, why haven't we done this? Walmart is a bit different here. I guess I'm curious then, over the last year and a half, 2 years of experimenting with this within the enterprise, what has surprised you about the ways employees are using My Assistant and some of the other applications you just laid out?
Yeah, I think, and honestly, what excites me is the sort of the excitement that people have and how they are diving into it head first, right? So early on, this is right after ChatGPT was released, and we were having a conversation with our business partners, and one of the finance persons was talking about prompt engineering, right? So that was exciting to me. So when is the last time a finance person talked to you about Java programming or C++ programming, right? So it is in some ways it's captured the imagination of everybody, and everybody sees the opportunity, so they're jumping in. When you look at our technologies, like I said, we have early adopters even before ChatGPT, Gen AI became a thing. Our developers were already using transformer models. Now, many of you know that sort of is the foundational model that made Gen AI a possibility. And we were using that for natural language processing, for other applications that deal with sequence of data, for example, like forecasting. And we've always used this. But what's exciting is now how the rapidity with which people are experimenting. I was in our Sunnyvale office about a month ago, when few developers grabbed me ad hoc and said, Shravan, I want to show you something we built, cool. And I'm like, I'm running to a meeting, and here these guys grabbed me. I couldn't say no. And what they showed me was how the system can automatically figure out accessibility gaps and create the fixes for them, create PRs for developers to review and accept. Now as someone who chairs our Accessibility Leadership Council, I could not ask for more, right? And so it's pretty exciting development.
Totally, and I realize we only have a few minutes left. So sad. But I guess maybe for one of my last questions, I'm curious about what the future looks like. I'm asking as if we have a crystal ball, but maybe for the purposes of this question, let's pretend that we do. If we're having this conversation again in a year on this stage here in San Francisco, what do you hope we're talking about when it comes to the applications for generative AI?
Yeah, this whole field is rapidly evolving as we all see it. So it almost feels like the future is now. So things are happening as we speak. I mean, some of the things that we've seen, the large language models have gotten bigger and better. Now more human-like reasoning is possible through these models. We've seen multimodal sort of capabilities like audio, video generation, and so forth. We're seeing emergence of interesting applications like AI tutor. I saw a video on Conmigo, which is pretty exciting. So the possibilities are endless. But I think if I were to name a few things, I would say agentic AI is going to be a big thing.
Totally.
How we sort of package your logic based on using prompt engineering and create these agents that go out and do work, and how they collaborate with each other and get better. So that's one area I think it's got a real application in business. The second one I would say would be the creation of sort of vertical models based on certain foundational models, right? So it's like having multiple experts sort of do different pieces of the problem. So one person is good at one thing, the other person is good at another one. So that sort of a vertical AI model development is something that we're going to see more and more. The tools will continue to evolve, and you touched on that earlier on as well. And I think one more thing that will happen is especially in companies such as ourselves, in Walmart, the business teams, technology teams, product teams, they become closer and closer. They would come together as smaller teams that have an idea, solve problems, iterate very quickly, and create a lot of innovation.
Totally. Well, unfortunately, our time is up. So, Shravana, thank you so much for being here with us today. Up next, we're going to have a short message from one of our sponsors, Lightspeed Venture Partners. So, thank you to them. And then Ina will be back with that highly anticipated demo that we were teeing up earlier. She's so excited. Our birthday girl gets a great present of telling you more about how AI can maybe help us talk to animals. I'm intrigued. So, thank you guys.
Thanks, Sam. Thanks, Tom.
Thanks.
Please give a warm welcome back to the stage, Axios' Chief Technology Correspondent, Ina Fried.
So as you can tell, I'm really excited about this next demo, but come on, talking to animals via AI, how cool would that be? So to help us explain where we are and how that becomes a reality, please help me welcome Katie Zakarian, from the Katie Zakarian to talk about the project that will hopefully bring us closer. Katie, CEO of the Earth Species Project. So we have some videos to help explain your work, but tell us what we're going to see.
Yeah, so decoding animal communication and the diverse intelligences on Earth have mystified, wrapped our attention probably since we walked this planet with other animals. And so I'm going to kind of test this audience's ability to decode. So we'll start off with a sound. Who wants to guess what animal that is?
Teenager. Oh.
Yeah, so that's actually the carrion crow. And so most people think a crow makes a caw sound, right? That's what we hear most commonly, but it turns out that these species of crow that live in northern Spain, what we don't hear is what sound they're making when they're talking to each other, when they're at the nest, when they're caring for their young, and it's these grunts and croaks that are actually more common. So going to the next slide, we've got our cute little prairie dog. And so this animal, interestingly, has the ability to communicate not just little sounds, but encoded in that communication is information about predators, even the shapes of their bodies of the predators, the color shirt they might be wearing, and so on. The researcher was called crazy, he said, by others, but by doing tests, he found that they had adjectives and nouns. And then lastly, we've got the elephant, this charismatic megafauna that recently, led by a team under Mickey Pardo, discovered that elephants actually have names for each other. But they're not the only ones. We also know that dolphins have names in the form of signature whistles. We also know that gray parrots whisper names to their chicks, and they pass that name on. And marmosets, these cute little monkeys, have a fee call that means names as well. So this is what's some scratching the surface of what's known. And what I'm going to show you next is a demo of NatureLM audio. So this is a model that was trained on billions of parameters of human speech, music, environmental sound, and animal signals. So what you're seeing here is the Paris Major, the great tit, recorded in Great Britain. And the model is able to discern what species this is, what is the behavior that's occurring. And what's really powerful about this is it's also emergent, these zero-shot learning. So it's able to also find species that it's not seen before. We're finding performance in that, which is kind of crazy. The model can identify species that it's not been trained on, and many other things which we can chat about.
Well, let's have a seat and talk about this, because I am fascinated. Before we get into how you do what you do, what got you into this work? What motivated you?
Yeah, so our nonprofit's mission is to decode animal communication using novel AI. We're all in this situation, right, where we have this urgent optimism. We're facing a biodiversity crisis. We're facing existential climate change risk. We know that we're going to lose 1 million species very soon. And so AI is presenting us with an opportunity to bring us back into connection. Communication, language, is the backbone of relationships. And the situation that we're in today is driven from a disconnection with the rest of nature. And we believe that AI is leading us towards this inevitability that we will decode animal communication and come back into connection.
So I'm going to try and get back to why we're doing this and what we hope to get out of it. But let's also check in what's possible today and where you're going. So in that demo we saw, we weren't exactly getting a transcript of what the animal was necessarily trying to communicate, but it was able to do more than just say, it's this type of animal. In that demo we saw it say sometimes male or female, or in other demos I've seen it estimate the age. What is the technology capable of today?
Yeah, so where we are at today is that we've spent pretty much up till now building the foundational building blocks for machine learning, building the benchmarks, doing things like denoising, solving the data problem. And now we're at this point where we're building the first large audio language model. And where we go from here is make it multimodal, bring in video, bring in data from animal-born tags. Those are tags that go on the body of the animal that pick up things like accelerometry and so on. And from that, we're able to predict behaviors. So how do you do that, right? It's sort of like, how can we answer these questions if we can't ask the animal, well, what did you really mean, right? And the answer is all those findings that I showed you in the beginning, those were enabled through a methodology called the playback experiment. It's been around since the 80s. Basically, you expose the animal to some type of stimuli, a statistically significant number of times, and you're able to predict, or you hypothesize what's going to happen. Is the signal going to be meaning for red shirt or not? So these methods have been able to help us understand what we know so far, but they're limited, right? Like the animal gets wise to what's happening in the recording. It's really a speaker with a signal coming out of it. What happens if we add generative AI, generative signals? What if we can essentially have a naturalistic conversation with a species?
And so, the idea on the one hand sounds pretty out there that we'll be able to communicate with animals using AI. At the same time, what we've seen with generative AI is it's an incredibly good translator. Like if you really boil down what the most successful uses of AI are, they're often translation. Sometimes it's language to language, sometimes it's genres. So, AI would find it trivial to turn our conversation into a gangsta rap or a haiku or whatever. So in one sense, you're just going one step further. The tricky part is we don't have a base to work on other than what you're talking about in some limited areas. But we do have a lot of data. And so the thinking is AI is good at finding patterns, even when we as humans don't do it. Do you think that's going to get us to a point where we have a better understanding of what animals are saying?
That's maybe one of the most exciting parts, is we live in these bodies with this brain and these sensors, right? But the sensors that we're developing can pick up imperceptible things to us. They're extending our ability. And then to be able to do that and analyze that at great detail and huge scale, we're basically going to allow the machines to provide us the hypotheses, as well as us giving them the hypotheses to answer. And so the next sort of like gauntlet for us to meet is, can we realize these findings that were from before with AI, with the just massive amounts of data and brute force? And early indications with Nature LM Audio is that we are going to be able to.
And as you brought up kind of when I asked you why you're doing this, you're not doing this because it'd be fun to make animals talk for human excitement. It's so we can better understand our role in nature, particularly at this precarious moment for the climate, and recognize that animals don't have a voice but should. One of the challenging things with AI is the same technology that's helping you do what you do is also using a tremendous amount of energy. And I hear a lot, oh, well, AI is going to solve the climate crisis, so it doesn't matter that it's using it. How do you wrestle with that?
I think it's super important to think about how to measure impacts and remediate as best you can. We've built an amazing team of, we just brought on a chief scientist. He was one of the authors of Audio LM, Open Up the Google Brain office in France. His name is Olivier Pietcan, and have brought in an amazing team to make sure at the very least that we're being cognizant to have the most efficient possible models, and then take the steps to, again, be able to measure at least what kind of impacts we're having and try to remediate them. But it is something that the entire field needs to wrestle with, among the many other ethical challenges and around responsible use and safety that are so important for this work, especially as a nonprofit with a vision of being able to use a technology to reconnect human beings with the rest of nature in a way that all the diversity of species can thrive, and not just accelerate and exacerbate the existing challenges that we're faced with, where we're extracting, we're taming, we're exploiting the rest of nature. That's not the goal here.
Well, I'm fascinated by your work. I appreciate all that you're doing. Hopefully, if not, at next year's AI Summit, one of these years, we'll not only be able to talk about it, but we'll have someone from the animal kingdom sharing their perspective. Thank you so much, Katie.
Thank you.
Welcoming back to the stage, Nicholas Johnston.
Hello again. So I'm very excited about this next group of partners. I think they'll bring a super interesting perspective to the conversation today. I'm very happy to welcome up to the Axios stage from the Siegel Family Foundation and the Kapoor Foundation, the Siegel Family Foundation's Executive Director and President, Katie Knight, and from the Kapoor Foundation CEO, Allison Scott. Katie and Allison, welcome to the Axios stage. Hello, have a seat. So jump into this big picture. We spend a lot of time up here with technologists, not with philanthropists. So tell us a little bit what role you think philanthropy has. Maybe Allison, starting with you, in this universe on AI regulation and making it safe.
Sure, yeah. Well, we're happy to be part of this conversation, and I think we'll share why we think it's so important that we're part of these conversations. At the Kapoor Foundation, we're striving to create a more equitable tech ecosystem that benefits all of us, and we are particularly interested in the policies, the investments, the educational support and opportunities that will be needed to create a more equitable future. We actually come from tech, so obviously we believe in its potential, but we're very concerned with the larger societal issues that we believe AI in particular can exacerbate. So we believe philanthropy, to answer your question, Nick, has to be at the table to galvanize support for transforming the education ecosystem, for supporting research, supporting scholarship, civil society groups working on everything from AI research to algorithmic audits. Important point that we'll come back to, participating in the policymaking process and not leaving lobbying simply to industry, and then investing our endowment dollars in alignment with our mission. So I have a few examples for you for what we're doing. Earlier this year, the Kapoor Foundation, alongside San Francisco Foundation and Omidyar Networks, announced a $25 million commitment to expanding responsible, ethical, and equitable AI in California. We also have supported the NIST AI Institute, the Tech Equity Collaborative, Federation of American Scientists, among others, who are all working on policy at the state and federal levels. And then today we also announced a gift to Northwestern University to establish a new center for technology, policy, and opportunity, which will really be focused at the higher education level, creating a new generation of policymakers. So those are just some of the examples, and Katie at Siegel has a lot more examples. She's been leading a lot of this great work as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think to the question of why philanthropy at the table here, I think if not us, then who? We're well positioned at the axis of academia and the private sector and the social sector, and I think those diverse inputs allow me, from my vantage point, and in full disclosure, I'm not technical, but I did work in tech before coming to this role. I think those diverse viewpoints allow us the opportunity to actually think really differently about how we design, deploy, and govern new technologies. And I think we have the credibility, because we're investors and we're operators, to speak to these things in rooms where, for the most part, a lot of our social sector partners are not going to be invited to speak, are not going to be interested parties in the conversation. And the only thing I'd add to that is that we've also funded some of the most basic research that underlies a lot of these new technologies. And so, for example, at Siegel, we've long been invested in the Center for Brains, Minds, and Machines at MIT, and that they are doing some incredibly foundational work, not only on large language models, but actually on new modes of developing artificial intelligence and thinking about human intelligence and AI and where we might think differently about how we develop AI in line with human intelligence. And simultaneously, we're working with Allison on a number of the things that she mentioned and thinking about kind of this frame of public interest technology broadly. What does it mean to design technology for people rather than throw technology at people and say, well, if you can't figure out what to do with it, that's on you, not on us.
Well, let's dig a little bit more, like on the public interest technology angle of that. Like what are those kinds of investments and what is like the long-term goal and vision of that kind of funding?
So at Siegel, we've invested heavily in building both the infrastructure for public interest tech. So think of things like some of that university research, organizations like Tech Congress that are helping get tech capacity and talent into the federal government and congressional offices. The Public Interest Tech University Network, which is focused on creating career opportunities and coursework, working with faculty and administrators at a network of over 60 universities that care about their computer science majors and future technologists having the spirit of public interest imbued through what they do. And a ton of work just on building the field and making some sort of cohesive narrative so that people who care about technology being built for good and technology being built with good in mind actually feel like they have space and community.
Yeah. So there's a huge challenge. I mean, it's a challenge and opportunity in AI, just how quickly it moves. And maybe Allison, you could maybe talk a little bit about this. What kind of challenges does that create for philanthropy trying to get into this?
I think there are a couple very specific challenges in terms of the pace. I think one specific challenge that Katie and I have seen in our roles and that we're trying to work with our partners on is philanthropy's understanding of AI and understanding of how AI impacts all of the other topics that they might be interested in. So organizations that are focused on health outcomes, economic opportunity.
It'll touch on everything.
It'll touch on all of that. And if we're not paying attention to the AI policy and governance, we will potentially risk even more exacerbation of the inequality in those spaces that they're then investing their grant dollars in. So I would say that's one of the main challenges. I think the other challenge, which is I think probably obvious to everybody, so I'll just name it, is the outsized influence of the tech lobby. And so if philanthropy is not engaging in the same conversations, then we're leaving it to just one voice and one perspective of how we should be governing the space. And then I think there has been some work done on this across globally, nationally, locally, but there are still not specific levers to hold companies accountable. And I think that's something else that philanthropy can play a really important role in.
And the only thing I'd add there is that I think the pace of AI development has really skewed a lot of people's BS meters, and they're just entirely in the wrong direction. And I think for us in philanthropy to be able to course correct there, to look toward what we've done in the past with technology and help people think differently about what is real and what is possible and what is just fluff and marketing jargon is a really important role.
Well, how do you address then as philanthropists the flip side of that, which is the equal access and opportunity as far as making sure everyone, for the stuff that's not fluff, the real good stuff, they have access to it?
Yeah, so I think that exists both in our digital divide work, which has been ongoing, right? People need access to internet and technologies, but also fundamentally, and this is KPOR's bread and butter, AI is foundationally a computer science problem and opportunity, and we don't have equitable access to computer science education in the US, and it should be an absolute table stakes opportunity for all young people to have access and exposure to CS coursework as part of their K-12 education.
And it seems like the power of AI makes that even that much more important.
Absolutely.
So much, if you miss the boat on this one, then you're in trouble.
Yeah.
Well, we're about to get the hook here, so we're going to end on one fun AI thing. The same question for the two of you. How are you using it in your life? Tell me something cool you're doing with AI.
What are you doing? I'll tell you. I'll tell you what I'm not doing is reading text message summaries. We were just talking about that backstage. I think what I've really appreciated in my work life is the pretty typical using AI to help generate ideas and concepts. I did ask it to write me a script once to help me deliver some content in a meeting, and what it actually gave me back, I wanted a script for my own talking points. It gave me a movie script for how I should run that meeting. I got a lot more out of that because it was and the people will nod, and I said, the people will nod.
Wait, did you use it?
I did.
All right, can you beat a use case like that? Bringing movie scripts to meetings.
I cannot beat that use case, but I'll share one example, which was I was at a meeting and I saw a really interesting pitch. So you said one cool AI thing. I'm going to mispronounce this, Te Hiku Media, which is a Maori speech AI model that helps preserve and promote the New Zealand indigenous language. I was like, that is really cool. That's cool. Like, let's think about problems that we can solve using AI technologies versus like these very...
And that's like the cool thing where it's going in a way where you don't even think, and sort of like the brain. You would never have thought to write a movie script. You've never had that kind of idea, and I think that speaks to probably the foundational awesomeness of it and why it's so important to make sure everyone.
And when it's applied to niche problems, I think it has this incredibly outsized impact because you're applying something really powerful to something that is not necessarily going to get the resource and an investment that it would otherwise.
Yeah. Absolutely. Katie, Allison, thank you so much for being here. Thanks to Siegel and Kapoor for being here as well. We're going to have, I'm told, a very short break, so don't go very far. We'll be right back.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, great.
Don't go too far. We'll be right back in just a few minutes. Axios AI Plus will resume in just a moment. Please take your seats. The show is about to begin. Here she is again, Axios' Ina Fried.
All right. Thank you, everyone. I know some of you are still finishing coffee and what have you, but if you can please take your seats and rejoin us, we'll get started. Before our next guest, I wanted to quickly plug our Axios house in Davos. Now, I know not everyone on the live stream or in the room is going to Davos, but if you are, our team, including myself, our co-founders, Mike Allen and Jim Vandehei, our business editor, Dan Primack, will be in Davos from January 20th to 23rd for the World Economic Forum. We have this Axios house in Davos where we've had amazing guests the last few years. We're going to continue that this year. We're going to have a bunch of events covering AI, communications, environmental sustainability, the world of VCs, and much, much more. So if you're going to be in Davos, please sign up to join us at axios.com/events. Otherwise, we'll have lots of coverage on the website and in our newsletters. If you have any questions, again, you can see any of our staff members with the lovely Axios A pins. For our next conversation, I really wanted to look at where AI is having the most impact today and what we can learn from that. And one of those areas is undoubtedly the world of computer coding. And what started that all was GitHub, which is a Microsoft subsidiary. And we have the CEO, Thomas Dohmke. Thomas. Hi. Hey. So one of the reasons that I wanted to have you here, aside from the fact that we could talk Legos for hours, the coding is one of these areas where we've really seen the generative AI got good enough sooner. And my suspicion is that even if we can't write a line of computer code, we can learn where AI is going by understanding how it's changed the field of coding. So help me understand, how has AI, and certainly the work at GitHub at the forefront of that, changed the way developers write code? Because I think one of the myths is it's completely displaced them. Another myth is that it hasn't made much of a difference. Help us understand, how different is coding? Are there more people doing it? Are there fewer people doing it?
It hasn't displaced coding at all. In fact, if I look at our own backlog, and I'm sure the same is true for many of you, it's still as long as ever. If anything, it only got longer through AI and through all the AI features, all the co-pilots, all the requirements, machine learning model, evals, and all these kind of things are now also on top of the backlog. And so if anything, developers have more work than ever and have more burnout than ever. And in 2020, we had this idea when we first saw GPT-3, that can we bring the effort down a little bit for our developers so we can ship features faster and ultimately build a competitive advantage. So I think that's the ultimate goal that we had, is not to replace the developer, but to increase developer happiness and decrease the effort that developers have to build features as software complexity is ever growing. It's sitting on an ever-growing pile of software. No company deletes lines of code as much as they're adding lines of code. And if you look at the original Copilot, it was really just auto-completion. It predicted the next line of code or multiple lines of code, and if you didn't like what you were seeing, you could just keep typing. And so it didn't invent a new paradigm. It just brought AI as a feature into the editor where developers already are, and I think that was the key ingredient to the early success. The other piece, obviously, is that writing programming language is much easier than writing human language because it's so predictable.
And that's kind of why coding got there first, right? Is because unlike, we have words that mean more than one thing, we have different words to say the same thing. Coding is kind of language neatly and logically organized, right?
Almost, I'd say. Obviously, the magical thing when I first saw GPT-3 writing code is that it somehow could write proper Python code and then write proper JavaScript code, even though it didn't have a compiler built in. So somehow it knew where to put the colons and the curly braces and all these kind of things. But yeah, the syntax and the words, the keywords, they're all well defined. And as such, I think the model had an easier time to predicting, what comes next. When you start writing, function test prime, it knew kind of like, okay, maybe he's testing a prime number calculation function, so it can predict the whole thing. While if you were writing 3 words in an article, it can't really predict what the rest of the paragraph should be without reading your mind, which it cannot do. And the other piece is, in coding, we have a verifier, right? We have a compiler, we have tests, we have things like called CI/CD, continuous integration, continuous deployment. So we know if code is valid or not, and that's much easier than in human language, where it's really hard to verify is what you wrote actually good and correct.
So that's kind of why coding is ahead of sort of broad tasks in terms of advancement. What are some of the lessons learned in terms of what works and what doesn't, what's needed in terms of human interfaces? How do you make sure that you are keeping the developer doing what they want to be doing and not automating the fun part?
I think, if we go back in time, what was the ingredient back then was to infuse AI into the workflow instead of moving developers to a completely new workflow. And so we did that with auto-completion, and then later we were adding chat into the editor, so you don't have to go through a separate web page and learn a whole new process. Because ultimately, developers, are never touch a running system, don't touch my tooling or my color scheme, those kind of things. So it was important to not move them to something else, but instead move AI into their workflow. Now, this was kind of like the first phase of AI. Now we are in 2024, and we are more and more seeing AI native workflows where, in addition to having AI within your environment, you also have new tools that reinvent the workflow fully. Based on AI and based on natural language. One such thing is what we call Copilot Workspace, which takes you from an idea, an issue, feature request, all the way to the code with the help of natural language prompts, and you don't even go into the editor anymore. And so I think that early days you had to infuse AI into the workflow, but now we're at a point where you have AI native workflows as the models have to become so powerful.
And do you see a day, like, is the endpoint that we reach a point where we can just describe what we want and it'll write the code and you won't need coding experience? And if so, how are we not then really replacing developers?
So we're already there to someone likes it. If we look at what happened in 2024, whether it's one of our prototypes called GitHub Spark or things like Vercel's V0 or StackBlitz Bolt.new, we're already to a certain degree there. We can use natural language to prototype a web page or a little mini application to track, the allowance of your kids and things like that. But all these things still generate code behind the scenes, and you still have to switch between the natural language layer and the code layer to solve certain problems. Like we are not at the point where you can get really to complex application with the help of just natural language. So I think we are going to head into a future where you have both those abstraction layers, and the nerds, the professional developers will have to go into the coding layer whenever they want to do something really efficient or solve a hard problem, build a machine learning model in itself. But a lot of hobbyists and consumers will be able to stay at the natural language layer and get problems solved there. And in many ways, that's what we have always done in computer science and computer engineering. When I started coding in the early 90s, there was no internet, there was no open source, there was no GitHub. You had to learn it all by yourself with the help of books. And I had a Commodore 64 first, and then a 386 DX40. And you had to understand, the architecture of the PC and the memory and the hard drive or cassette tape. Today, nobody does that anymore, right? Developers sit in the cloud and they're running thousands, if not tens of thousands of virtual machines, and they don't really care what chip is in there and how much memory and so on. And so we have always moved up that abstraction ladder. We used to build it all ourselves, and now we're using thousands, if not tens of thousands of open source libraries. So AI is just the next step on that leveling up to the next stage.
You've talked about a goal of having 1 billion people interfacing, 1 billion people coding. What was the phrase you used?
At GitHub, we want to empower 1 billion humans to become software developers.
So my guess is that can't all happen by getting 1 billion people to open up an IDE or a coding environment and do it that way. Does this start to come into consumer tools? You're part of Microsoft. Does it come into Copilot?
Well, first of all, I want to start with, we take it as normal that our kids learn, reading and writing and math and physics and biology and art and all these things in school, yet we don't expect all of them become professional physicists and professional biologists or, computer scientists. So I think it's just natural that we should teach our kids coding. It should be a fundamental human skill to know how to write software on a computer, because we're all consumers, right? We're in read-only mode. Most of us are in read-only mode, and we should move into read-write mode. And it doesn't mean that when you're 18, 20, you decide, oh no, everybody becomes a professional software developer. And so that's part of the ambition. We want to empower everybody on this planet to be able to create software whenever they want to. Now, human language plays a big role because, first of all, when you're 6, 7, 8 years old, more likely than not, the language you're speaking is not English, while computer science and open source and all that is predominantly English. Code, programming language, the keywords are all English words, if then and forever and whatnot. And so having a Copilot, a natural language interface that explains code to you in your language, in Hindi and in Brazilian Portuguese or in German, democratizes access to technology. And then also your parents at home no longer have to have that background. They don't have to be able to answer all the questions that kids naturally have. They can just ask Copilot to do that. And so everybody who wants to learn coding, and I think most 7, 8-year-olds want to actually learn coding because they're fascinated by the technology. They're fascinated by computer games. They want to create their own things in the same way that they want to draw pictures. So I think that's part of the motivation of why we're doing that. And the other one is that I think we all move into a world of personalized software where instead of you just downloading an app from the App Store that some developer created for you, you're creating your own software with the help of AI.
So what I'm hearing is we still need people to code. We actually need more kids to learn to code. So
every kid.
Every kid. So that gets you a lot of people. That'll get you to your 1 billion people pretty quick. But I'm still wondering, are we going to get 1 billion people into something like GitHub today as we know it? Or do you think it comes into more consumer tools? Again, I hear Copilot all the time from Microsoft.
I think these worlds are fading together, in many ways. natural language will be the connecting element between using software, as you already do today with the ChatGPT or Siri on your phone, or Alexa. All these were controlled by natural language to the professional software developer layer that also uses prompt crafting or the ability to describe a problem at such specificity that the model can actually generate the code for that. And so I think both of these things are true, and hopefully they're all on GitHub. And then whether you're saving code on GitHub or whether you're saving natural language, well, we are already doing that. Developers on GitHub interact in issues, they interact in pull requests, they have code and they have the argument, if you will, or the review or the comments on that in natural language. So I think that all is going to be fused together. And of course, at Microsoft, we have a full spectrum of that from, using Power Apps, which is our low-code, no-code platform, whether it's GitHub. And of course, when you're writing prompts in Microsoft 365 Copilot, you're also learning the skill of how to prompt, to maybe create an image or create, a quick email.
And talk about being part of Microsoft, because Microsoft has had a mixed track record with acquisitions. Certainly, when GitHub came around, it was one of the more controversial in the developer world because GitHub had always been everything to everyone, open source, a different sort of community mindset, and people thought of Microsoft, I don't know, maybe not the enemy, but not who they wanted in GitHub's hands. But it seems to have gone relatively smoothly. How did you maintain developer trust? How is GitHub's relationship to Microsoft?
I would say more than relatively smoothly. I would say it has been an incredible journey for GitHub within the last 6 years that we have been part of Microsoft. And in 2018, when Satya and the leadership team decided, to do this acquisition, we were very clear about keeping GitHub's independence and keeping GitHub within Microsoft as an independent entity, with a dedicated CEO, with a team that can preserve that culture at the intersection of developer happiness and open source. And we defined 3 clear principles. And the first one remains true today, which is we always put the developer first. And so we always, everything we do at GitHub, all the products we design, all the processes, even our blog posts, we always ask the question, is that what developers want? Is that, how we're addressing our key audience? The second one was we wanted, Microsoft to accelerate GitHub. And notice the key here, it's not the acquired company accelerating the buyer, it's the buyer accelerating the acquired company. And I think that's often the mistake in acquisitions, that you look at the synergies that you have as a buyer instead of what can you as a buyer bring into the company that you're buying. And I think that is, has been gone very well for us, and Copilot is actually the perfect example where Microsoft's relationship with OpenAI, Microsoft's cloud with Azure, the expertise in responsible AI and those things enabled us as GitHub to bring this product Copilot to market very, very quickly, ahead, 2 years ahead of ChatGPT. Before there was an AI hype, before there was an Axios AI Summit, and we leverage, those relationships and if you will, the power of the mothership to bring this product into the world. And then lastly, of course, as GitHub, we want to accelerate Microsoft, and we did that, in multiple ways. Copilot is another example here because, the first Copilot was GitHub Copilot, and now Microsoft has all these Copilots. So we brought the brand, we brought our expertise in how to design that product to Microsoft, and ultimately we're bringing, revenue into the Microsoft P&L.
So we only have about a minute left. I'm curious, what aren't we talking enough about when we talk about generative AI? What have you seen in terms of how we have to build it for humans that maybe isn't getting discussed enough?
From my perspective, I think it's the unlock of creativity that generative AI have. I think there's a lot of discussion about the fear of losing your jobs and replacing developers and other knowledge workers with AI, instead of talking about how it unlocks the creativity of these workers and how it enables them to do more with the skills that they have. I think image models are a perfect representation. I'm by no means an artist or painter, and I can use Stable Diffusion or Midjourney or DALL-E to create an amazing image, and I can just keep iterating with a prompt. And in fact, I'd love to come back to kids. If you give these tools into the heads of kids, what do? They generate cute puppy images, right? And then they generate another one and another one and another one, and they put their cell phones full of these images. Now transport that concept into software and imagine what everybody will be able to create in software. And it's the same idea. It's not a one-shot example where all of a sudden the AI generates the application perfectly for you. You keep iterating in the same way you do with an image. And of course, you will take some time and patience and some expertise of how to do that. But I think humans will be able to create amazing software and amazing things.
Well, thank you so much, Thomas Domke.
Thank you.
Put your hands together for our View from the Top moderator, Axios publisher Nicholas Johnston.
Hello again. We're in the home stretch here. Thanks for sticking with us. We'll jump right into a conversation with our next partner. Huge thanks to Intuit for being a partner with us today. And I'm happy to welcome to the stage Intuit's EVP, General Counsel, and Corporate Secretary, Carrie McLean. Carrie, welcome to the Axios stage. How are you?
Good, thank you.
So much of AI conversation is about giant, faceless, multinational corporations using it. I think from your vantage point, you probably have a different view through products like QuickBooks and MailChimp for small businesses. Tell us how AI is playing out with those companies.
It was so interesting. The last speaker was talking about what are people not talking about when it comes to AI, and I think it really is how AI can enable small businesses. And at Intuit, we have millions of small businesses on our platform, and it's really hard to be a small business. They're always trying to get paid.
Yeah.
They're always trying to figure out how much money they have. They're trying to get customers.
Pretty basic needs
really
for any
basic
company,
needs,
right?
and they're folks who that is not their expertise. And so AI can truly help level the playing field for these small businesses with larger businesses who have access to financial expertise, marketing expertise, all those things. AI can actually help level the playing field and allow them to compete with larger businesses.
I want to come to that level of the playing field thing in a minute, but you have some activations downstairs, and to your point of that expertise, I think there's one downstairs where there's a guy who makes chocolate and doesn't want to do accounting, and so having AI do with accounting means he just gets to make chocolate. That kind of leveraging I think you're seeing is what for small
Exactly.
businesses
I mean, we know nobody wants to do accounting.
Right. Well, there's accountants here, we're sorry.
That is, I mean, we want to do it because that's what we do. We love it. But nobody actually who's a small business goes into small businesses to actually, I want to do accounting. I love making chocolate, but accounting is really my passion. No one does that.
You wouldn't do a chocolate as the side business for that. No.
And so for us, it's really critical in order to actually help small businesses be successful. If you think about a small business, it starts out with one person who sort of has a dream of I don't know, I love coffee. I want to open a cafe. I want to start a roastery. They don't know how to do all the things that come along with that. Like if you think about, they've got to actually figure out how to forecast, how to understand when they're going to run out of money, when do they need capital, how do they get customers, how do they do a marketing campaign. These are things that you have in a big business where you have people who are expertise in those areas. AI can actually help fill those gaps for small businesses. So if you think about, for example, currently in QuickBooks right now, AI can actually help you forecast what your cash flow is going to be so that you know, are you going to be able to pay your employees? If not, AI can actually help you qualify for a loan, a short-term loan if you're a small business and get access to capital. AI can also help you create and send out and mail and test a marketing campaign, all branded with your own brand.
And that comes into that level of the playing field, I guess. Giant corporations have offices full of people who will help do that. How do you see, explain a little bit the impact you see about them having, small business now having access to perhaps the capabilities that almost only large businesses
It's huge. I mean, I think, especially as we start to go into even more sophisticated AI like agentic AI, when that starts to become a reality, small businesses are actually going to have data expertise at their fingertips that large businesses have come to actually rely on in order to actually really know where their customers are, what their customers want, how to sell better to their customers. I mean, this is something that small businesses have always been at a disadvantage.
Right.
And AI actually has the ability to actually provide them with the same advantages that larger companies have. And we can actually then rely on small businesses to actually become an even bigger part of our economy, which is critical.
What are the challenges here, though? We talk a lot of AI, sort of AI literacy, or encouraging adoption, or making so sure that people who aren't naturally attuned to it have access to that. How did that play out among small businesses?
Well, I think with small businesses, again, right, they're one person, two people, a couple people, they don't have time. Changing their processes is very complex. It takes a lot of brain power for them to say, oh, I'm going to have to adopt a new technology to try and actually make my business better, optimize my business. That said, right, technology and adopting technology like AI actually makes small businesses more successful.
How do you help them bridge that gap? How much
Yeah.
of that is just like telling them these things exist, encouraging them to use it? What are the pieces that come together for it?
Sure, I think there are challenges. So some of that is baking AI into our products, right? Being able to actually use the data that we have to actually help businesses become more informed about their own businesses. But the other one, a couple things that we're doing just to sort of bridge the gap, the barriers to adopting these kinds of technologies is, one, we've partnered with ICIC, the Initiative for a Competitive Intercity, to actually sort of understand what the gaps are for small businesses and what's stopping them from adopting the technology. We've done a study with them that will hopefully be coming out early this next year to help inform sort of nonprofits, governments, and companies about how they can help bridge this gap around technology literacy. In addition, we are kicking off a tour in the next year where we're going to, it's called Intuit More with AI, and we're going to run workshops across the country for small businesses to help familiarize them with AI tools, how to use AI tools to help accelerate their businesses, to really sort of like start to bridge that gap. That's a really small thing. I mean, it's one company trying to actually start to bridge the gap, but you have to have hands-on learning with some of these small businesses. The other thing that we do is we're really a partner to government to help encourage them to encourage the adoption of these kinds of tools, digital tools, AI tools, through things like funding, training, and also legislation that helps encourage small businesses to use these tools to better their business.
Like I mentioned of this here, like I think the reason people are here is because they're AI evangelists, like they believe in this as a technology, and a piece of it I think we're encountering is this awareness. And so like, how can this room help? How can policymakers, how can people at other companies help to spread in that adoption?
Well, I think, it's one thing that the last speaker also was talking about was, there's a lot of discussion about the fear around AI. And I think there's not enough discussion about the great things that AI can actually do. It absolutely has to be done with responsible principles and in a way that's ethical and with the proper data protections. But, there's so many amazing things that AI can help us accelerate. The drudgery that comes along with running a small business, not just accounting, but other things as well.
We're dumping on accounting so much.
But other things as well. Inputting your receipts. They're crazy things that take small businesses so long and take them away from what they really want to do most. And so I think being able to talk about the great things that AI can help with to accelerate versus always talking about the dangers of AI, I think it's really important to focus on some of the advantages that AI can provide.
In conversations I have with so many people, we had one just last night here on this stage about adoption of AI, where there's that moment where it saves you an hour or 90 minutes, and you're like, what? Wow,
yeah.
That light bulb thing
happen?
goes off, and then you're adopting it. So I feel like a big issue here is helping more small businesses have that moment where they see they can skip that.
Exactly. One of the biggest moments for small businesses at the end of the year is like they figure out, oh my gosh, I've got to do my taxes now.
Yeah.
And AI actually, if you've been using AI through the year, if you've been categorizing your receipts using AI, then all of a sudden your taxes could just be done for you. That's how AI can actually help accelerate the business.
A magical world of the future.
It would be a magical world of the future.
Let's end up on one fun thing like with everybody else. What's a cool way you're using AI in your life? What's something cool that you've seen?
Well, maybe this is dorky, but we just had our Christmas party with my team, and every year we do a poem at the end of the year to 'Twas the Night Before Christmas, and someone writes it and puts in all of our accomplishments to that poem. And this year, we actually fed our accomplishments into AI and asked it to write the poem for us, and it was fantastic.
Oh, crushed it.
It was
good.
Amazing. It was fantastic.
You're not about to whip it out of your pocket here.
No, I'm not,
okay,
because I would bore this entire, but our team, it was fantastic.
All right, it'll do your taxes if you're a small business, and it'll write great poems.
I love it.
What does AI can't do? That's awesome. Carrie, thanks so much for being here. Thanks hugely to Intuit for being one of our partners. We're on the home stretch. Stick around. The conversation continues.
And next, Axios business editor Dan Primack.
Hello, everybody. Wow, it's a good crowd. Very big crowd. As that disembodied voice said, I'm Dan Primack, business editor of Axios and writer of the daily Axios Pro Rata newsletter, which you can get by going to getprorata.axios.com. I've also been instructed by this piece of paper to tell you that I will be in Davos next month with all the fancy people drinking hot chocolate at our venue, The Lighthouse, which is in partnership with Lightspeed Venture Partners. A couple of people who are going to speak with us, Bill Ford of General Atlantic, New York Stock Exchange President Lynn Martin. If you're going to be there, let an Axios person with events know so you can get on our list. And now, kind of without further ado, somebody whose company as of, I don't know, like 8 hours ago is now worth $62 billion. DataBricks CEO Ali Ghodsi. So there is a lot of news, but and we will get to all of it, and I'm a finance nerd, so I care more than I probably should. But let's start a little bit with you. Say the ChatGPT version of your life would be born in Iran, your parents leave with you when you're kind of a toddler, go to Sweden as refugees, you're educated there, you end up coming to the US as an adult to be an academic. Wait, that's a lot. And when you think about your childhood and growing up, are there lessons you feel you learned or skills you feel you learned that you've brought to leadership at DataBricks?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think the biggest challenge that most of us as human beings face is that we have all these self-defense mechanisms that make it very hard for us to see the truth. I had the privilege of being moved around between lots of different environments, lots of different schools, lots of different countries, different religions, different socioeconomic statuses, and what it kind of taught me, painfully, is that you can kind of simulate and put yourself in someone else's shoes, and that's extremely important as a CEO, because when you have your customers, you have your employees, you have product people, you have sales people, you have HR people, you have marketing people, finance people. How do they think? How are they going to react? How do you get them motivated to all work towards the same goal? The most important thing is, can you simulate backwards? How are they thinking? How are they going to perceive the messages you're telling them? Yeah. And that I think I learned. That's why whenever people ask me, like, oh, I don't want to move to that city because my kids are this age. I don't want them to leave school. I say, no, do it to them. Uproot them, move them between different schools, make it hell for them. It's awesome.
You've said that you feel that company cultures are reflections of the CEO's culture, a company's values are reflections of the CEO's values. What is the culture of DataBricks as a reflection of you?
Yeah, I think I think you are kind of what you grow up doing. Like that first job, you spend a bunch of the years doing. That's who you kind of are. So I grew up as a researcher. I did my PhD and then I did research. So I think it's the mindset of a researcher essentially. So one of our cultural principles is truth seeking. That's what you're trying to do in research. It's not easy to get to the truth. It's elusive. And facts change and so on. But really, as a researcher, you're always trying to not be so emotional and so opinionated about what your opinions or where you are. You just want to find out how does this work? What is the truth behind this thing? So that's an essential cultural principle at DataBricks. It's not common in the industry. In many big companies, people get really good at how to manage up, how to say the right stuff.
And you don't think that, it's one thing when you're a relatively small company, a couple dozen people, even maybe 100 people. You're thousands of people now, right? How do you know if that's continued to trickle down all the way?
Yeah, so the way you establish culture is, 3 ways. Number one, you interview for it. So make sure that you're evaluating every person that comes in based on the culture principles. So truth seeking is one of the things. It's not actually that hard. Tell me when you screwed up last time. Tell me something that you really botched up. And if you can
not
tell.
Not reporting on your fundraising yesterday. That's when I did it.
Exactly. Well, there you go. See, so that's your truth seeking guy. So you're hired. But that's kind of like, you can kind of sense, whereas people are like, oh, maybe I worked too hard or something, or they just open up and tell you like, oh my God. So do that in the interview process. If you do that right, you're kind of halfway there. If you want to have plus points, also make sure you promote the people that have that culture. So in the promotion process, you make sure that you really evaluate, are they really satisfying those culture principles? And that one is hard because you might have stellar employees that have had huge impact, but they're actually they're not really the culture of the company. They succeeded because of other reasons. And then the third one is, performance management. You shouldn't have people in your company that don't satisfy. And maybe you made a mistake, maybe you hired the wrong person, maybe you promoted the wrong person, but now that person is not the culture. Can you move them out?
How do one of the things that's interesting about DataBricks compared to a lot of other VC-backed startups, and part of this is the valuation, the money you've raised. You guys have done a bunch of large acquisitions, a couple acquisitions over $1 billion. When you're buying another company, granted smaller teams, you're not. How does that apply on the culture side? Because you might think you've got that with the founder, but there's a bunch of other employees who didn't necessarily interview the same way that DataBricks would have interviewed to bring those people in.
Well, the culture, whoever the CEO's personality is, the culture of the company. So if you get the right CEO, you're good. So
that's easy. Well, is that? I mean, how big is that for you as opposed to possibly getting the technology or?
Yeah. Look, most companies, what they do, they have these corporate development teams. They look at, EBITDA, revenue growth, finances, and then they evaluate and they do a lot of finance, Excel math, and then they convince themselves it's a good idea. We kind of don't. We do that last. We start up front with the people. Are we going to have a cultural match? This is like the number one thing we look for. Like we spend all our time looking at them. Like, who is this person? Where is their background? Can we find anything online? Then we spend time with them. So that's like the number one evaluation criteria. Because we're going to work together. So it kind of doesn't matter what they did in the past. It's what we're going to do next 5 years together. So that's number one. Number two, we start looking into product. What is this product? Is it an awesome product? Is it like, what's the IP? What's the innovation? Yeah. And the last thing we do is we bring the finance people in who are like sitting at Excel sheets.
Can I ask, Tabular, did you even bring the finance people in? It had what, like under 5 million of ARR and you paid 1.8 billion? Did the finance people get in the door for that deal?
No, we locked the doors. Tabular is an interesting one because I kind of stayed in touch with the founder. I've been tracking him and trying to get him to work at DataBricks long before he started Tabular. So when he was at Netflix. So it's something that I've been staying close to for many, many years. So we knew what we were getting.
I've realized we've been talking for 6 or 7 minutes, and I haven't asked you actually what DataBricks does. So I'm going to ask you to do it in the way that if you were sitting at a bar with somebody who doesn't know anything about AI or technology at all, what's the short version of what DataBricks does?
Yeah, look, let's take 60% of the Fortune 500s. They have massive amounts of data. That doesn't get organized by itself. So the boring plumbing behind the scenes to organize all that data and secure it, which is super important because there's cyber attacks left and right. Everybody's trying to hack these companies. So securing it and then enabling you to do, get insights out of it. And the insights are both backwards looking, like, hey, how much did I sell last week? How's this product doing in Japan? And also forward looking, so AI. Which customer is going to churn? How much should I stock up this particular product? All the way to generative AI. Should I, JetBlue uses us to figure out, when there's a delay on the airplane. What's going on? Which terminal should I go to? So it's a generative AI application that you talk to. Or Block uses us, Square. When you set that up, you can now, the store owners can just speak in English and say, hey, I have 5 products. The price point is this. And it'll set everything up for you automatically using AI. But all the basically data plumbing that happens in the large organizations, chances are if there's any large organization, they're probably using DataBricks for all of that.
When you helped found the company, there were 7 of you, correct?
Yes.
Am I correct saying they're all still with the company? You're the second CEO, but everyone's still there.
Everyone's there.
That's unusual. Even companies with 2 co-founders, often one by now, would be gone. Why do you think everyone is still there? And can you talk a little bit about that dynamic? Because it is unusual.
Yeah, look, I think we were, again, it goes back to the culture. We were researchers. And we were working together actually at UC Berkeley even before that, doing research. So, I think that research culture has kind of continued. And even though I have the CEO title, it's kind of like 7 CEOs. They have a lot of power in the company. And they run whole product lines. And, they're a pain in the butt for me.
All right, let's talk about this news. You guys announced this morning you have $10 billion in commitments. Most of this is going to be kind of an employee tender. And there's other things you announced, kind of $3 billion of ARR. Why raise this round instead of just go public and get the money out of the public markets and let everybody cash out that way who wants to cash out?
Yeah, I mean, look, when we were thinking about this, we were looking back and forth, and we were like, the earliest time we would IPO, we wanted to wait. This year was election year and so on. We want to get some stability. People are worried about interest rates, inflation, so on and so forth. So we said, look, it's dumb to IPO this year. So we're definitely going to wait.
Even though the companies that have IPO'd this year have done well.
Well, I would say that this was 6 months ago, right? You got to plan ahead. So 6 months ago, we were like, hey, it's just dumb to IPO this year. Just wait, right? Let things settle, get more data. Don't have to. And then working backwards, it was like, well, earliest theoretical possibility of an IPO would be next year. And then, there's lockup periods and so on. So it would just be too long of a period for employees to get liquidity, frankly speaking. So that's kind of what started it. It's like, hey, we want to just quickly, fast get cash. And we started small. We want to get like $3-4 billion is what it started at. But then the press, unfortunately, starts leaking these things.
Oh, so
and then all the investors
blaming the press for bringing in $10 billion? Yes. Everyone here would like the press to give them $10 billion.
Literally, what happens is the press leaks it, and then your phone explodes with investors that are like, Ali, it was like 7 years ago I talked to you, but I love you. Let's talk.
I heard you guys have basically 25 new investors on the cap table, institutional investors. Is that about right?
I have no idea. I have no idea.
You do know this.
I do not know. I have a big finance team, hundreds of people that take care of this. I know the top investors, and I met them. But yeah, I mean, there was like, what was shocking to us is we said, okay, so we'll raise a few billion. But then suddenly I saw this Excel sheet where they keep tally of all the people that want to invest, and it was $19 billion of interest. And I almost fell off the chair. And we hadn't even talked to everybody. And it's like, oh my God, that's huge amount of numbers. So then we actually moved the price up. So the price went up.
Where did the price start? The reports were around 55 billion. Is that ballpark correct?
Yeah, I started around $80 a share.
Yep.
Ended up at 92.50. So yeah, so it kept raising the price, and the investors kept getting more and more unhappy. So at some point, we just stopped, and we said, we're just going to cut back the investors, and we'll just take half of the money.
Does this mean that DataBricks doesn't go public in 2025?
No, I think that it's still a possibility. Again, theoretical possibility that we go next year. That would be the earliest. But it could also very well happen the year after. I do think the majority of the lifetime of DataBricks will be as a public company, even though we're not public yet. But the thing that's really top of mind for us is, can we provide liquidity to the employees? And this enables us to do that. And that's super, super important.
If I'm an employee, though, and granted, I obviously want to get some liquidity because I want to be able to pay the mortgage.
Yeah.
I've had this stock that keeps appreciating in value. I get that. But if I'm an employee, am I not sitting there thinking, damn, if we had just gone public last week, we'd probably be a $100 billion company, and that 92, whatever you said, it would probably be $130. This deal is causing me to basically leave money on the table.
Well, what I want to do with DataBricks, with the investors and the employees, is to get the folks that are really excited about having massive impact with data and AI over the next decade or so in the long run. Those are the people that we want to have. And by the way, there might be some people that are like, hey, I've put in many, many years, I'm done here. We want to thank them. There's no hard feelings. They helped build the company. But what we want to really do is focus on that long term. We're not trying to time something. Yeah, the market is super hot right now. It might not be in a quarter. Something devastating might happen. The AI bubble might burst. Oh my God.
Do you think it's an AI bubble? You said bubble, so I'm going to ask, is this a bubble?
I mean, it's peak bubble, AI bubble, yes, of course. I mean, it doesn't take a genius to know that a company with 5 people, which had no product, no innovation, no IP, just recent grads, are worth hundreds of millions, sometimes billions. You get billion-dollar valuations on these startups that have nothing. That's bubble.
Does it worry you at all? It's interesting. When I talk to your investors, some of your investors who did this round, they all say the same thing. They all think they got a bargain on this deal.
Mm-hmm. Good for them.
Good for them. Do you have any concern, though, if you think this is a bubble, do you have any concern that you're going to have to go back to those employees, whether it be 6 months or a year or 18 months, and say, we're worth less now. Your shares are worth less now?
Well, no, I think that we have...
Not because the company is struggling, but because the valuations were inflated. Your multiples are inflated.
Anything can happen to anyone. In fact, we do this thing. I'm paranoid. You started at the beginning where I grew up. I grew up in wartime. Literally, they were bombing the city when I grew up. So look, every year we do these skyfall plans where we think about what happens if GFC 2.0 happens, which is Great Financial Crisis 2.0. So we'll look through all these different scenarios. So we're ready for anything that comes our way. But I think we have a really steady business. Our churn is all-time low, and it's been forever, and it's a recurring business. So I sometimes joke that even if you get a professional CEO who understands nothing about our business, they'll be able to continue to drive this to, say 10 billion revenue. Mm-hmm. So I'm not too worried. But yeah, things happen in the world, and sometimes things might go down. But if we stay focused on the long term, I think data and AI is going to continue every year that goes to be slightly more important and slightly more impact on people's lives, on companies. If we just stay focused on that and keep doing that, great things will happen to us.
You said you think that the majority of DataBricks' life in the end will be as a public company.
Yeah.
there are a bunch of your peers who basically said there's no good reason for us to ever go public. It is more pain than it is worth. We will maybe do it if we are forced to, but we really don't want to. Is there, from your perspective, is there a value of eventually going public, whether it's next year or the year after? And if so, why do it at all? There's a lot of private money. You could just keep flipping. You could be Mars.
First of all, it was very exhausting raising $10 billion. Like, you know, it's like basically I had to facilitate this gigantic transaction between all these parties.
That's why you have 100 finance people. They do.
Yeah, but you know, I can't just fully delegate to them, right? You want to make sure that, you know, so it is a big logistical operation just to keep facilitating these trades. So that's number one reason not to do it. Second, it is a massive marketing event, which we haven't had yet, but we're saving it for one day. So, you know, that gives you a big boost. Especially it's a big boost in the United States. Of course, we're international, but, you know, the bulk of the business here is in the United States. So I think that's also not to be underestimated. You know, that's it. I think those are the things. I do think the value of being public has reduced over the years because there's so much access to capital. You know, like I think 10, 15 years ago, needless to say, there's no reason. Like you had to go public. You couldn't get this kind of capital at all. So things have changed, but nevertheless, we will go. We're running it like a public company, and we are going to go public.
One of the things that's interesting about this round is that you are now worth more, from a valuation perspective, I know private versus public, than Snowflake is. You have exactly. So you have kind of said it has almost sounded like since Frank left, Snowflake is no longer your competition, or at least the way you view it. So
kind of.
If Frank is gone and Snowflake is no longer the target, who's the target now?
Look, I think that, you know, we have. It's kind of like, you know, you're playing a card game and somebody gives you a hand and you look at your cards and you have like an amazing hand. And you're like, oh my God, this is great. So, but what do you think when you have like that amazing hand? You kind of think, don't screw it up, right? So I think the most important thing for DataBricks is don't screw it up. Like, you know, treat our employees well. You know, make sure that we're secure and that we're safe and that we continue innovating. Don't lose that innovative research kind of origin sort of ingredient that we had. If we keep doing those things, I think great things will happen. We don't need to obsess with this.
You don't think you need if not a target, and I don't even mean an enemy, but like that bigger company, that bigger CEO that you're chasing, because that's been, it seems, from the outside, part of Databricks' DNA.
It was. We had a program called Snow Melt, and we were going after Snowflake, and you know, we demonized them, but you know, it kind of that's behind us, to be honest.
There's not like a Salesforce shrink or something program that you guys have at the.
We don't have that anymore. No.
You don't have anything like that.
We partner very closely with Salesforce. We love them.
You partner with lots of companies.
We're partner friendly.
Fair, you're partner friendly. Something else you said recently, and this came up actually in the earlier conversation that Ina had with the Sierra AI guys, was you talked a bit, and this kind of goes to AI bubble or AI hype, talked a bit about how you view this a little bit like the later stage .com boom. You talked a little bit about kind of, you had all these search engines, and this isn't about Databricks per se, but a lot of the partners you have.
Yeah.
And when I think back to 96, 97, 98, there was a lot of search engines. There was a ton of them. And in the end, a new one came and crushed them all. When you think of all these big Gen AI companies that you are working with, their customers and quasi-competitors of yours, do you think a lot of them are going to go down in the dustbin like Lycos and AltaVista, and we're going to look at massive fundraisings of companies that truly disappear?
I think so. However, it's also maybe helpful to remind people that there was a little bookseller called Amazon.com in 1997. And back then, I remember because I wrote my master's thesis about it as a young kid.
I remember because the only stock my father ever shorted.
There you go. And it was, you know, and by the way, just to remind people, they were selling books on the internet, and people said, well, obviously people are not going to buy those, because what kind of idiot would put their credit card on the internet? Like, no one will ever do that. And here we are today. So that company is still around. So yeah, while Lycos and AltaVista and Yahoo are not here,
I just mean there seems to be some comps between them and some of the LLM companies in the sense of what they do and what the.
I mean, I agree. I think that people are obsessed with what's going on right now, but I think that we're going to see major changes. And I think there's going to be new mega companies that are born that have not even been started yet. We're going to see that in the next 10 years. The big challenge is very hard to predict them because who would have predicted Twitter or Airbnb or Facebook in 1999? Back then, we were just obsessed with routers and Cisco. And it was like, and then IT, right? Pets.com. So, it's very, very hard to predict these things. But you can imagine, like, let me just throw one out that I'm kind of like, I think it's very plausible. Take healthcare, which is, I think, 17% of US GDP. And it's extremely important to everyone in this room and their family members. And at some point in your life, it will be extremely important if it's not already is. Imagine the killer app. Okay, that's a weird phrasing. Imagine Imagine that like amazing, app that has, you have this personalized doctor that has seen billions of patients and can give you like the best healthcare advice. How much would you pay for that?
Exactly.
A lot, I think. That company doesn't exist right now. And I don't think it's any of the existing players are going to be that. And I could go on about education. How much do you care about education for your kids and so on? Right now, education, it's, that's not an interesting hot, like actually in the VC space.
Well, it's something that VCs have lost money on consistently for generations and have stopped investing in.
Yeah, VCs always say, do never invest in education. You can never, ever succeed there. There's no innovation to be. But I think they're actually wrong. In this new era, it's obvious. What do we use LLMs for? They're basically professors, personal professors that can just sit there and teach you stuff. So I think we're going to see a lot happening here. But I do also think some of these companies are amazing, and what they've accomplished already is really amazing. And maybe one of them is going to be that Amazon.com that survives in the next 10, 20 years.
I want to ask you a similar question to what I asked the Glean CEO here last night. I was on the stage back in May, and David Sachs was in that seat. He is now the incoming AI czar, crypto czar too. Yeah. If you were talking to Sachs, what's one thing, if you were AI czar, you're talking to him, what's the one thing you would like an AI czar to do?
Yeah, I would be a little bit careful with the regulation. I think we got a little bit, it was like regulation craze last year. We had these flops counts and all of that, there was all these executive orders and EU and, politics, intertwined with politics at companies, with regulatory capture and all kinds of things. But now it turns out that we were worried about these scaling laws. We're going to create super AGI. And now it turns out we hit the scaling wall. Yeah. And, that's apparently not happening. So that was like
So is your message to Sachs, kick your feet up and don't do anything?
No, we should pay attention. I think that actually, and I think this is well known, to look at the use cases. We don't want people to do we should definitely make sure that it's illegal to have use cases that are hurtful for society. But that's different from like, hey, don't do any research on AI, or let's hold the research back. Or I remember when there was like, hey, let's have a moratorium, 6 months, don't do anything for just 6 months, and then we can start again. Yeah. That's kind of silly.
Final question for you. When you talk about DataBricks expanding, and obviously you continue to hire, and you think about, to kind of bring this back, you think about your own experience growing up, obviously as a refugee, not in the United States, but in Europe. What are your thoughts in terms of kind of the growth of Silicon Valley, your company and other companies like yours, when it comes to immigration, and possibly how US immigration laws are going to change, both for skilled and unskilled workers?
Well, I don't know how it's going to change. But I do think that, I did a startup in Europe as well. And I love Europe. I'm kind of a European, at heart. I grew up my whole life there. I could not create a DataBricks there. Silicon Valley is very, very unique. There's like, it's many things come together. It's like the perfect storm that makes it happen. One of them is funding. Like, good luck raising $10 billion in Europe. So that's just one. But the second one is that you get this extremely hungry talent that comes here, and we make huge sacrifices. Working 100 hours, giving up everything in their life. It's kind of crazy how much risk they take and how hard they work. So that's the second one. And then you have the universities, and then you have the research labs nearby. It's really, really unique. So I hope that we can preserve it and continue doubling down on it. I think it's a secret kind of engine behind the United States, GDP kind of growth and motor behind the economy. So I hope that we preserve it, but who knows what's going to happen with it.
That's all the time we have. Ali, thank you so much. We have a quick message from a sponsor. Then Ina will be back for a few final guests.
Okay. Thanks. Sure.
Welcoming back to the stage, Nicholas Johnston.
All right, I think the sun is setting. We're in our big finish here. This is the last time you will see me tonight, unless you are in line next to me downstairs at a bar when we're all finished. And so without further ado, I'm very excited to welcome and thank our last but not least partner, Workato, and welcome to the stage, Workato's Chief of AI Products and Solutions, Bhaskar Roy. Bhaskar, welcome to the Axios stage. Good evening now, sir. Welcome.
Last act of the day.
This is it. Here we go, right? Okay. In your role, you work with a lot of companies on their AI strategies, and I know a particular focus of yours is AI agents, which is something very interesting and new. Give us a sense from your vantage point, like what's exciting there and where it's going.
Yeah, that's a great question. Remember the time when we used to say there's an app for that?
Right.
I think we are in an era where then everyone is saying there's an agent for that. If not, it'll happen soon.
Right.
The way we see it is, the agents that are out there, these AI agents, they are mainly role-specific agents. What I mean by that is, currently the market is all about there's an SDR agent, there's a customer support agent, there's an internal help desk agent, there's a data engineering agent. There are agents for all of these various roles which are there. And they are great. They improve the productivity. They can work tirelessly 24/7. But what's often overlooked is this area of business operations. It is the place in the middle. What I mean by that is it's how businesses really work. How businesses work, there are a set of processes end-to-end that you need to do. You need to orchestrate these processes across the board. And these are things like, say lead to cash, right? When a lead comes in all the way to collecting cash, how you onboard employees, what's customer experience management, supply chain management.
Right.
All of these are mega processes that you need to orchestrate end-to-end. And where we see things are headed is more of having this area, which is what we call orchestration agents. So if you look at a particular process, say a lead comes in all the way to cash, there will be various actors in that particular process. There will be, say, an SDR agent, a sales agent, a finance agent, all of those things coming in. But if you're not looking at that holistically end-to-end from a process standpoint, I think you'll miss out. Your business overall operational efficiency will go down. There'll be risk associated with it. So that's how we see the market headed, moving from role-based.
Is this a way of thinking about the agent where it's almost taking a step back instead of looking at one of these individual agents that do a thing? Is it an overarching framework, or how are you tying all this
Yeah, so
together?
it is an overarching framework. So if you look at a simple thing I'll go back to lead to cash. Every customer or every company implements it very differently. So it is customized per company, and then it's different by verticals as well. So when you start thinking about your entire process end-to-end, you start thinking about where do people play, where do agents play, what are the various resources and applications that come into play so that I can actually orchestrate this holistically end-to-end. And in fact, it reminds me, there's an old saying, it's all about people, process, technology.
Right.
Technology is becoming accessible, means the tech stacks will start looking similar with everything which is
Everyone
there.
has that.
Everyone has that, and
right.
then there are some LLMs, et cetera, sprinkled in. People is where people are focusing on in terms of role-based agents is the process, which I think is the glue that ties all of this together.
So what is your advice for companies on how they adopt this? Like we've talked up here before on stage about how quickly things are moving. What kind of mindset should a company have if they're trying to engage with these kinds of things, which can be so disruptive to what they're doing?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the way we think about it, if you look at Workato, we are an orchestration platform, right? Which is what our customers have been using us to orchestrate these processes end to end. Often, it's called the messy middle or the middleware.
Yeah.
We call this magic middle
because
that's
where
the things that happen.
Right.
And how businesses operate. So I think the way it'll pan out is essentially when businesses start looking at a process end to end, they'll start figuring out, okay, what are the resources, what are the things that we need in order to orchestrate this fully? It is that holistic approach that they need to take in order to maximize what AI can do.
When they figure this out, what is the return that they see? Do you have examples or a broader framework? If you figure out that if you get into this messy middle and you get it right, what can the improvements be?
So the outcomes can be enormous. If you look at overall from a business standpoint, there are a few things that we look at, right? In the sense, think of revenue growth, cost reduction, operational efficiency, risk reduction. Those are the core things that people look at. And if you think about each of those, there is a process underlying all of these things. And so when you start thinking from an operational standpoint, the outcomes that you can see that AI can drive will not just be on an individual basis or improving the role or productivity of the role, but driving that operational efficiency, driving that revenue growth, driving that risk reduction.
Right. What's the advice you give to companies as they begin on this kind of journey, right? It can feel like from a corporate standpoint, it's a massive opportunity, but where do you begin?
Yeah, I would say that, you start with your operational team.
Right.
Because, in each of these organizations, there are teams which are very specific around business operations. There are sales operations teams, there's marketing operations teams, there are HR operations teams, et cetera. They are all thinking about how to really make things better.
The steps that they follow every day.
The steps that they follow
right?
in order to do that. And so you have to start mapping those out. And most companies have that. Now, the question that becomes is, what can AI do in order to optimize this? How can they continuously learn and optimize these processes? so that you're getting better, cheaper, faster results.
Is there like an awareness hurdle? We've talked up here a little bit earlier, particularly for small businesses, to say like, you know, do you even know what AI can offer? Do you encounter challenges where people are or hesitant or resistant of like handing these processes over to something?
Yeah, there is an awareness hurdle, but I think in terms of handing it over, means in today's world, if you look at it, people are automating these processes. There are various things that they are doing it. So it is mainly, I think it's more of the folks that we need to go to in order to drive that awareness and see how AI can benefit that.
As far as speed of adoption, I'm interested in how quickly this is coming, like how quickly companies are beginning to adopt it, or when perhaps those of us on the outside begin to see like real material impact for companies. Is that a 2025 thing, or is that a thing happening right now? We don't realize it.
I think it's a 2025 thing.
Right.
We'll start seeing at least the rise of it. I don't say that, you know, there's going to be full adoption. Who knows when that will happen? But in our customer base, we start seeing that, you know, and it could be our bias rate, right? In the sense because our customers are orchestrating all of these processes using Workato. So take it with that pinch of salt that it's a biased point of view. But we are seeing our customers talk about these processes and saying, where can AI and the reasoning powers that it has today can help us automate that. And not just automate that entire thing or orchestrate that process end to end. It's also how can it be more dynamic? Because AI has that dynamic reasoning based on various signals that it's seeing. It can actually look at how it can orchestrate that process better, how it can learn and do things better.
And then the results of that, I think, is what we're waiting for coming next. So like, okay, you figured out this process, you've saved it. I can now go do something else. I've now saved money. I can now hire something else. I can do launching. This is something that you're seeing how soon over the horizon to really big impacts like that.
I think from an awareness standpoint, who knows when that will happen, but in our customer base, we are starting to see that outcome and ROI come through.
Right.
So when they're looking at, you know, whether it be a process of very simple of, say, access to a particular software, or when they're looking at a lead to cash oriented thing, we are starting to see that how those things are impacting those customers. And often it is multiple X, right? Because now AI can do things very dynamically by getting all the actors in place.
Right. So before we wrap up, you get the final one fun thing question. What's the AI cool thing you're using in your life? What do you got?
I've been thinking about this. I have a 21-year-old son, and over the summer holidays, and he's a sports geek, name it. He's in, you know, NBA, NFL, joining, you know, fantasy groups, and God knows how many fantasy groups he's a part of. He built a sports agent, and which could understand, because he would do all the research on the web and then figure out what to pick, how to change his fantasy roster, etc. He built an agent which helped him do that.
Help him win his games?
Get more fantasy leagues. Now, here was the challenge. I don't know if I should say this. If my son hears this, he'll kill me. He was also doing sports betting, right? He's 21 years old, so I'll give that to him. So, and he was looking to figure out how he can have an agent bet the right game, and so that he can make, you know, from $5 to $20, whatever it is he was looking at. Now, that got me worried, because I have also, apart from my 21-year-old, I have 12-year-old twins, and it's a son and a boy, and my younger son is just a fan of my older son. So he's also a sports geek as a result of that, and he says that, you know, Aditya, can you show me as to how to do this, because I want to do the same. And all of a sudden I was like, hey, there needs to be some guardrails or parental control over here, because I don't want my 12-year-old start doing betting. Fantasy group is one side, but you know, how do you do that? So that's my fun story.
The two sides of the sword there of the AI. You can win your fantasy, but watch out if your kids start winning a lot of money on sports gambling.
That's right.
That's a pretty cool. That's a great way to end one. Huge thanks to Workato for being our final partner tonight. Bhaskar, thanks for joining me up on stage. Stick around.
Thanks, Nicholas.
That's really great. Thank you.
Please give a warm welcome back to the stage, Axios' Chief Technology Correspondent, Ina Fried.
Hey, y'all. Thanks so much for sticking with us. We've got some more fun and excitement. As co-founder of Instagram, our next guest has changed the way we connect with our friends and families, how businesses connect with consumers, and now he's at Anthropic as Chief Product Officer, changing how consumers and businesses alike connect with technology. So I'm really looking forward to having a conversation with our next guest. Please welcome Mike Krieger. Welcome.
Thank you.
So yeah, I mean, you've had an incredible career in tech. You've been through a lot of these hype cycles, a lot of these waves, mobile, obviously. And I'm curious, you've been at Anthropic now a few months?
7 months, yeah.
Yeah. What are your impressions? What made you want to join Anthropic? What's been like?
Yeah, I mean, like flashback to Instagram, I think the thing that we got right was something was happening, which was cell phone adoption, camera adoption, cell phone networks getting good enough that you would actually think about, going out and using a social network on the go. And I felt a similar kind of shift, which was not a novel thought, that's why there's a whole conference here, but starting kind of halfway through the second company that I was working on called Artifact, same co-founder as Instagram. And I had two experiences that were like my whoa moments. One was starting to code with AI, and I've always loved to build. And this was before a lot of things were in place. Like definitely no editors like Cursor or Windsurf or anything like that. But what I started doing is like writing really detailed prompts. And this was before even multimodal input, so you couldn't put images into the models. I would draw like little like text art of the screens I was trying to build in Artifact, hit enter, and it was pretty slow at the time. Again, it was last year. And I would go downstairs, get a coffee, come back, and it would have generated like something that was 80% of the way there. And in your head, you're like, I have a very convoluted, hacky process. What does this look like a year from now? And you could see where that direction was going to go. And then the second one, so part of what we were doing with Artifact closer to the end of the company was using some of these LLM APIs to summarize articles or make friendlier headlines or personalized content. And things that would have taken me months to build. That's probably underselling it because I have to then recruit the team first. We're done in an afternoon, and you could prototype and build really quickly. So like that confluence of two things, how quickly things were going to get built differently, and then also the kinds of products that were unlocked when all of a sudden you had access to LLMs doing the work that otherwise would have taken months to train a model. We're both like, okay, I need to be closer to this work. So as Artifact wound down, my biggest criteria of what I wanted to do next was get closer to the models, but be somewhere that I felt really aligned with the mission, and then that confluence of things led me to Anthropic.
And talk a little bit about sort of where we are. And we started the day, I asked these questions, where are we in the AI revolution? What's working, what isn't? From your perspective, like it seems to me you're on the optimistic side that, maybe it's 80% of the way, but that's a lot of value. Like, do you see the technology continuing to get better enough to take on more and more tasks? Again, one of the things I said at the beginning was, some days I wake up and I'm super excited. There's a million things I can think of doing. And then other days I'm like, it's still drawing, 6 fingers on the hands. Like, enough details are wrong that the images aren't what I need. Like, it's not writing, enough. Like, where are we from your perspective, and how many obstacles do you see in the near-term road?
Yeah, I think I'm generally optimistic. Maybe I'll illustrate it from a user research study that I watched about 2 or 3 weeks ago, and I thought this was really illustrative. It was a participant, and they came in, they had some experience with Claude, but they weren't a super power user of Claude or Anthropic products. And the researcher asked her to, all right, what's something you're trying to do at work right now? And they were composing like a kind of basic agreement to send out to a vendor. And she's like, well, why don't you try using Claude for it? And she typed in like some kind of simple prompt and hit enter. And it generated something that was like pretty generic, because all she had told the model was, hey, I need a vendor agreement. And she's like, oh, okay, and like her face, you could kind of read between the lines, like, could have downloaded this off of Google in like 5 minutes. This is not actually better. And then the researcher says, can you give it a few more details? And obviously this is a pretty guided research trip, but this is showing the bugs or the sort of limitations in what we need to do better. And then she does a couple of refinements and then hits enter, and then it generates something that is like basically there. And her eyes open and she goes, please don't tell my boss, which was such an interesting moment where you're like that did not take 2 hours. I like to talk about how success with AI comes from the model layer, the right context into the models, and then the right UI and the right prompting to get the right data out of it. And you could tell that our models, Anthropic builds some of the best models in the world, but until we get those other two right, it'll still be, that cliche, the future is here, it's not just evenly distributed. I think it's like the future is here, just not everybody knows how to use it yet. And that's like what excited me about coming on and doing product at an AI company, which is how do we get it so that, first of all, she shouldn't have to know that you need to provide more details. The model should get her there interactively. And second of all, is chatting with a model even the right initial UI? Can we do something better? Can we have a friendlier way of approaching it? So I think directly to answer your question, I'm optimistic. I think we have so much work to do though, so that it's not just a thing that the nerds like me know how to exactly prompt, but it's something that it's accessible to more people.
But you hit on something that I've been talking to a lot of people about, and some really smart folks that I know tend to agree too, which is, yes, there's a bunch of improvements yet to be made on the models, but even if for some reason there's a calamity, we got no new models, we could probably spend 10 years just creating more tailored interfaces and better ways of using that. Yeah. My sense is a lot of the disappointments in generative AI come when we ask it to do too broad a task and we put it in the most generic tool we can think of. So, there's still a lot of people that their use of generative AI is, let me go to ChatGPT or sometimes Anthropic, type in, a generic prompt with no additional files or data. And again, it's that initial, it's kind of there. Whereas if you build it into the workflow, and I'm curious from Anthropic, do you want to be doing all of that? Do you think that there's just the models and let the rest of the world do it? Or do you want to take on some of that work of building different interfaces?
Yeah, I completely agree, by the way. I tell our product team, we love our researchers, but if they were cryogenically frozen for 5 years, we should have at least 5 to 10 years of work. And maybe as a quick stat to illustrate this, there's a benchmark called SWE-bench, which is basically how well do these models do an agentic coding task, a coding task from end to end, take a bug, go all the way to solution. And what I think is really interesting is Sonnet, which is our latest model, our 3.5 Sonnet, scored a 48. The current top of the leaderboard is 62% of the benchmark. It's actually still our model underneath. It's just that other people outside the company have gone and built more and more elaborate sort of scaffolds or environments, et cetera, but the underlying model actually hasn't changed at all, which just shows that there's that much intelligence left untapped in the models. In terms of Anthropic, at our base, we want to be powering these companies, right? So the probably fastest growing editors in the world right now are Cursor and Windsurf. They both use Sonnet a ton. It's great that those things are happening outside the building because there's companies that are waking up every day and they're entrepreneurs that will live or die by the quality of that exact product. And I think that's really powerful. The kinds of products we want to build, I think, are ones where we can push the bounds a little bit of what human to AI interaction looks like. My background is in human-computer interaction. And at the time I was like, well, what UI do we want? And now it's how do we present Claude in the right way? So we'll do that almost as a way of painting forward what could be in the industry and then let the ecosystem of companies fill out everything else around us in terms of apps.
And what about on the consumer versus business side? I mean, historically, consumer is a really tough business to be in, but it's also where you have made your start. Today, we got a cadre of people paying $20 a month to either OpenAI or Anthropic or Microsoft or Google. You guys are probably the least known in the consumer set. Is that an important area? Is that an area we'll see more of from you all?
Yeah, I think there's two ways I think about that question. One is work, which is what our focus has been. We've taken an enterprise focus and a work focus from the beginning. Looks like work in the enterprise, but actually manifests itself in personal lives as well. As a pretty trivial example from my last weekend, I don't know how many of you do holiday cards. We do them every year. And every year there's the our kids in a new grade at school, they give you a PDF of poorly formatted addresses and great, I got 2 hours to go put these into my spreadsheet. I did it in 5 minutes with Claude, right? I was like, here's the PDF. Please extract these addresses. Here's the format it needs to be in here. One example, go and enter in it, it outputs it. So that's a consumer use case, but it's grounded in a lot of I was watching it do this and I was like, oh, all the things that we've been working on, artifacts and CSV support and PDF multimodal. I was like, oh, it's all coming together for this fairly personal use case. So going into next year, I think we'll keep the focus on work and work adjacent things, but find ways in which it has relevance for people managing families, people doing things at home, people running small businesses and expanding it that way. So that's one area. And then you might ask why, if our focus has been on enterprise, I really notice when I go into conversations with CIOs and CTOs, the easiest conversations are the ones where the decision maker is already, oh, I love Claude. And you're like, well, you love Claude, your company doesn't use this yet, but you discovered it for some personal, maybe semi-professional use case, and that opens the door later. So I think it's important for us to have some play there. Do we need to be as big as Instagram was? Probably not to fulfill the mission, but we can't just be purely enterprise or else we'll just have a much harder uphill climb on that side.
Because it does strike me, and they're totally different phenomenon, but they've happened fairly similarly, and you were starting to get at this. I remember the bring your own device, like what got phones into the enterprise wasn't enterprises like, these will be incredible mobile sales tools. I mean, there was a small amount of that with BlackBerry and Microsoft, but they would have only reached the C-suite. It was when everyone got their first iPhone or Android and was like, I have to bring these into work. It strikes me that it's not that dissimilar in the AI world where you have people using ChatGPT, maybe afraid to admit they're using it at work, or Claude or whatever. It's sort of driving the businesses, and the businesses are trying to figure out how do we make use of that.
And to connect to our first question around like usability and how undistributed that is, what we find, like we have Cloud for Enterprise, which is our sort of business product that gets deployed across organizations. All of our most successful Cloud for Enterprise deployments start with one person that was like the Claude crazy enthusiast that was maybe the initial connection, and often they find themselves being an informal sort of like internal evangelist storyteller. Like they'll go and like, no, I've created like 5 perfect projects that will help you get started, and it's like they're not doing it because of anything else that they see the potential for it, but then it all of a sudden unlocks how other people see it at that organization as well.
And maybe, and I probably should have done this at the beginning, but maybe describe how you think of Anthropic. Like, I feel like Anthropic tends to come up, a lot of former OpenAI people, a lot of people left because they weren't sure if OpenAI was sticking to the mission. Anthropic's more safety conscious. But that tells you what Anthropic isn't. Yeah. It maybe describes it. What is Anthropic?
Yeah, I think fundamentally Anthropic, at its core, both like in mission, but also like in how I've experienced it and what attracted me to it, is founded on the belief that you can build AI in a way that's both responsible to society and from a catastrophic risk perspective in the long run, but do it while still building great models and great products. Now, that's often the harder path. I can give a couple examples, but kind of showing that you can do both, and then leading by that example.
Well, maybe talk, one example, I don't know if it's one you would have brought up, is computer use. Because one of the big things, again, we've talked about agents a bunch today, letting the chatbot break free of that and make use of the computer is a pretty big elevation of its control. So Anthropic and others are starting to let you use the computer's power. It doesn't just have to return an answer, but it can go do something. Google has a plugin it's testing for Chrome. Talk about how you guys can be more focused on long-term safety and still at the leading edge of that sort of agentic, letting your, giving Claude access to the whole computer.
Yeah, that one's a great example. So that came out with the release of our newest Sonnet models about 2 months ago. And the capabilities were ready and could have been launched. But it was, the estimated launch date was like a week before the election. And we're like, we cannot put out a model that is going to use computers and not be thoughtful about the fact that there is an election in the world's largest democracy. So we spent a bunch of time actually, not on the model side, but actually on the trust and safety side, figuring out, all right, what is the model doing? And we have to build these like in a really sort of like additional complexity way, which is privacy preserving. So in a privacy preserving way, what is the model out and doing? And if it looked at all like it was doing signing up for voter roll registration or, like getting in touch with candidates, we're like, you know what, like there's like, here's a place where we'll actually opt for a little bit more caution than anything else. Like we're just gonna like disallow that or at least flag it. And it was like delayed the launch by a couple of weeks, but it was like, I think completely the right decision from that regard. So that was a very conscious decision on how you go out. And the second one, beyond just like how we've described this computer use, is like it's still very early. Like we don't think you should drive your Mac necessarily without some other controls. Like the products we are experimenting with building, I liken it much more. And if you've like owned a Tesla, you've gone through this whole evolution of like, there's a point where like it's both hands on the wheel for even like autopilot on the highway, and then eventually it gets like more like, all right, well, as long as you're checking in every once in a while, I'm comfortable with it. So one of our most promising internal prototypes, Claude is suggesting what to do next, but there's a final moment where you kind of like just click it and say like, okay, yes, I do want you to type this in. I do want you to submit a form. And then what we hope to do over time is make that more nuanced. So if you're just opening Chrome, fine, go open Chrome. If you're about to submit my credit card, I definitely want you to check in with me. And so one of the major areas of research we have, we think about human oversight. So how do models understand what they're doing, and what point do they want to check in with people? And I think that's a way where you can build more agentic, more computer use behavior, but still do it in a way that's very linked to how people think of how they want these models to behave.
And do you think the technology is broadly good enough to be giving it? There's a lot of talk about agents and giving more power to the chatbots. I still see a lot of hallucinations, a lot of things that a human can easily solve, or less and less, because one of the things that's hard about chatbots is they're convincing even when they're wrong. But at least if you have a human there, there's a chance of detection. I do worry about the compound effect of, as soon as you get agents, then you soon get agents talking to agents. Do you feel like we're on a safe path for all that?
I think next year there's a lot. I don't think we're there with today's models. I'll start with that. I think a lot of the work that has to happen between now and then, I think is fairly defined. I think human oversight that I mentioned, I think just improving the planning abilities of these models a bit more. I think right now they can make plans, but then they sometimes rabbit hole into something like, oh, that wasn't necessarily the right way approach. Giving the models access to tools, but doing it in a way that's thoughtful. So we open sourced a protocol that is all about how the models interact with the world and how the world interacts with the model. Because we think, sure, that benefits cloud, but we actually want to make that an open standard. And again, if you do that correctly, then there's well-known authentication and well-known security around that versus a little bit more of a agentic free-for-all, which is maybe more dangerous. So I think there are core pieces that need to happen. And then the last one, and this is a combination, and this is why I think this work is really fun. It brings everything together. It's a combination model, product, and sort of trust and safety perspective, which is how do you supervise? What does the oversight look like when you aren't just asking for something and waiting between 3 seconds and a minute is the longest answer you're going to have right now, to hours? What does that UI look like? All of a sudden, a thing in my head is, do you start moving from typing requests into a chatbot and watching the answer to assigning tasks in a to-do list and then watching the model explain, all right, here are the 10 things I think I'm going to do to solve that to-do. And you're like, that seems reasonable, go. All right, I got stuck on this one because it needed your input. Okay, great, that's a nice time to do it. So I think before that work, I would not feel like agents are ready. But with that work, you can start imagining it take on some research tasks where it's not going off and creating a lot of change, but doing some agentic retrieval, preparing a presentation for you, perhaps that took 8 steps, might have taken an hour, but is pointing the way to what happens when you give it a little bit more autonomy.
And you've made a couple allusions to self-driving cars, and I think it is a really good analogy. One of the problems that the auto industry has dealt with is, it's one thing if the car can drive itself entirely. It's another thing if the human's entirely in control. There's a lot of nuance and challenge when the human doesn't need to be fully in control, but they kind of do. Yeah. Is there a similar thing in AI where the UI gets so good and people get so used to clicking OK, which we all know. I mean, you see that pop-up come up and say accept cookies, your cookie monster there, hitting accept cookies. Is there a similar thing in AI interfaces that we need to be cautious of?
I think so. I mean, even the open source project I mentioned is called the Model Context Protocol. And in our initial implementation, it asks you before it uses every tool. And you can say, yes, and don't ask me again for this chat. And of course, you're like, yeah, okay, just go. So I've seen it exactly what you're describing. It's very human nature. I think that is partially a research question, which is, can we have it ask for permission when it deems that there's something that is potentially a bigger thing?
And maybe explain why.
And maybe explain exactly why. This, and actually not just go yes or no, or hey, this is a little bit more nuanced, And I remember Microsoft got a lot of flack when there was that version of Windows that would hard interrupt you and ask yes, no question. At some point you develop that clicking instinct. So you're asking a very good question, and it's on our minds around what is the right model of interaction for confirmation and destructive, or we call them destructive actions in HCI, but bigger actions that aren't undoable.
We only have about a minute left. I'd love to leave people, this is the last full segment, we have one more demo after this. What do you think is something that isn't possible today, but you can see by the time we get together next year, celebrating the holidays, we're going to be doing with AI that we can barely imagine we're doing today?
All right, I'll do 2 topical ones and I'll be quick. One is I dream of the day where the holiday card process is just please I'll even give you the PDF, but like go like look at what we did this year. Like maybe do a first draft in our voice. We actually did Claude for a lot of our writing. Like a spoiler alert, if you get one of our holiday cards, like it was at least half Claude written, but edited, you know. But like end to end, like get me mostly there, so I'm not like clicking on a bunch of things. So that's one piece. The other one is, you know, I've moved from Instagram where like it's very consumer and you're meeting individual users, but they're not like business meetings, to a world where I'm doing a lot more external meetings with clients or potential customers. And a lot of my time is like, all right, who am I meeting? What did they do? Who's this customer? Like, what's their journey? You know, what is even this industry about? And like, I just want like show up in the morning and be like, Claude has researched everything and has given me like individual like briefings for each of those, and I don't even have to think about it. And I can just be present to the meeting and not like be like, what was this company again and what did they do? So those are two that I think are very, very
well. I mean, I think that's pretty exciting. Help with your holiday cards and you know, tell you who's in that meeting. So that's an exciting future. Thank you so much.
Thank you so
Mike
much.
Krieger.
Thanks, everyone.
So for our final, don't go anywhere, we're not done yet. Sorry, if you need to use the restroom, if you need to take a call, obviously go there. We're almost done. For our final segment, we're gonna have a little fun and see just how creative AI can get. Please welcome Senior Design Director at Adobe, Samantha Warren. And we've got some fun stuff. I know some people have to go, but stick around. So people are clearly excited to get to the party. We're standing between them and a party, but we're gonna try and make this fun. So you guys cooked up a demo to have a little fun?
Yeah, we're about to go to a party. What do we need but an invitation to the party? So we're going to show how AI actually works in an Adobe Express to make something a little bit creative for our party.
All right, let's see.
So we're going to start out here with an Adobe Photoshop file. I mean, a lot of creators actually use Adobe Photoshop, but in order to really take that to the next level, we're going to take it over to Adobe Express, because Express is a product that allows anyone to be able to use AI to really take something to the next level. What's great about Express is that you can actually control a lot of aspects of your brand, but give it to all of the creators within your organization to be able to modify.
Looks like you're making an invitation for the party.
Invitation for the party, changing the text right now. But then we're going to want to add something a little bit more personalized, a little bit more creative. We hear you're a San Jose Sharks fan.
I am, and it's been rough the last few seasons.
So we're actually going to go ahead and create a box in order to put in some imagery here. We put in our prompt, San Jose birthday cake. And it turns out that actually our model doesn't recognize San Jose Sharks on purpose, because Adobe has created a commercially safe model that protects the IP of the San Jose Sharks. This, we believe, actually helps with the creative process. Instead, we're going to go with a purple magic cake, because we hear you like
I do like purple.
Constraints often breeds creativity. So we have now our purple cake. We used AI to take the background out of behind the cake, and now we're using AI to use a blend mode to blend it into the background. All of this would have taken a lot longer using other tools, but AI makes it fairly simple.
And what I also notice is, like we were talking about with Mike, it's not all AI, it's not all creativity, it's actually bringing the AI in within tools that look familiar. And that's kind of one of the things that Adobe's done in addition to commercially safe.
100%. We believe this technology really will thrive in people's workflows. And so, for example, here we can add a little bit of motion, which is actually not something that I would be able to normally do with my current skill set. AI helps me bring a little bit of motion to this particular invitation, and then I can tweak it because I still have some creativity, some creative control. The AI just got me a little bit further faster. But now I'm actually going to save it out. If you've ever had to save a particular graphic for a lot of different social media campaigns, it can take a long time. Very quickly, AI was able to produce an Instagram post, a poster, and an invite with just a few clicks.
Awesome. And the idea here is this is a tool available to everyone, right? This is
Absolutely.
a free product. If you happen to be an Adobe subscriber, you get more bells and whistles. But is this the kind of thing you think we'll see more of, where Adobe has this long history of these professional products, but now the combination of AI kind of brings some of those capabilities to everyone?
Yeah, AI has always been kind of baked into the way our products work, and we believe that creators, they have their workflows. We want to just help them be better at what they do. And so working it into their workflows, making it really accessible.
Awesome. Well, I really appreciate it. Thank you for the invitation. We do have one more thing coming up, but thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, real quick, because I know I am standing between everyone and drinks, including for myself. I wanted you all to be the first to hear that we'll be back next year for not one, not two, but 3 locations for AI Plus summits. We'll be in New York City during Tech Week in June, then Washington, D.C., and then back here in San Francisco to wrap up the year. Obviously, there's going to be a lot to talk about in D.C. I think there's a new administration coming. I have been trying to stay away from the news, but I hear about that. So be sure to join us as we cover these very consequential times. Be sure you're subscribed to the latest Axios newsletters, including AI Plus. If you need any help, anyone with an Axios badge can help you. I want to take a quick second for some well-deserved thank yous. First to Dan, to Sam, to the entire Axios events team that puts together gatherings like this. They're the best in the business. I'm so glad to be working with them. I have a list of other people I want to thank. Tara for hosting us, CSL, Foxtail Catering, our photographer, Chris Constantine, our partners, Meta, Lightspeed Venture Partners, Intuit, Siegel Family Foundation, Kapor Foundation, and Workato, and of course to all of our speakers. Now, I'd also like to thank, and I don't usually get the chance to thank, my family and friends who are here today, my parents, Michael and Doris, who I would literally not be here without. My amazing partner of nearly half those 50 years, AJ, and our son, Harvey. See, Harvey, I told you I do real work. Don't forget, we have the reception right after this downstairs. Before we do that, I've been told our Axios team has a surprise video. I have not seen this. Let's see what they have cooked up. So roll that video.
Happy birthday to Ina Fried, the rare person who can explain and review the most advanced technology while giving a signal boost to good old-fashioned bricks. Ina has become a one-word brand for tech expertise. Jim, when was the last time that somebody said to you, wait, which Ina did you mean?
Ina, we love you. Thank you for being a great human being. I don't have these cool props like Mikey, who apparently went to acting class to prepare for this segment. But you're an awesome colleague. You're a great mentor. You're a wise advisor to us. You're the perfect DNA for Axios. So thank you. And I know there's a lot of other people who want to wish you a happy birthday.
Hi, Ina. You've always done an amazing job of staying on top of what's going on in technology, and I'm sure that's exciting as ever. It's amazing to me that you're turning 50. Happy birthday, and thanks for all your great work.
Ina, happy birthday. I have to tell you, I was delighted to be asked to give this greeting. I think it represents something kind of cool, a journalistic organization thinking to ask, and even more, me being so excited to give. And I am. So I'm thinking about you today. I hope it's a wonderful one. In fact, scratch that, I hope you have a wonderful year. Happy birthday.
Happy birthday, Ina. I hope you're having a great day. I hope you have a great celebration. I've so enjoyed getting to spend time with you over the years and all of the work that you have done.
Ina, I am so happy to be able to give a little bit of a birthday shout out to you. I couldn't help but think how long we've worked together. And of course, I can age you because everybody knows your age now. But wow, not only were you working at a outlet I probably shouldn't name for quite some time, I think you even followed the Apple hockey team, is how far back we go. I do remember, I will say a shout out to All Things D, and I remember being on stage with you and Walt, which I had to look back and say that was 10 years ago when we were back to the iPhone 6, and what an incredible interview and what an incredible time that we had back then. But the reality is we've loved your work wherever you've gone. Apple people love to read it. I love to read it. You cover technology with the best of them. And I'm super proud to be your friend. I'm super proud that you've covered us to the depth that you have, and that you're continuing to kick ass at the ripe old age of 50. So I just wanted to say happy birthday, Ina. We love you.
Well, thank you, everyone. And now let's go have a drink.